1867. The Wyoming Territory was not a place built for softness. It was a high, lonesome land of big sky and short grass, a place where the wind never stopped speaking. It whispered of grit and alkali dust and promises that broke as easily as dried buffalo bones under a wagon wheel. This was the heart of Red Cloud's war, a bitter, bloody struggle for the land itself. The air was a contested thing, a sharp mix of pine from the distant Black Hills, the sweet, dry scent of prairie grass, and the metallic tang of gunpowder. The smoke from a soldier's rifle and the smoke from a Lakota fire pipe rose to meet the same, indifferent blue. Into this land came Eleanor Whitlock. She was 24 years old, a widow. Her husband, Dr. Arthur Whitlock, had been a man of science, a surgeon for the United States Army. He had not died from a bullet or an arrow, but from the cholera that had swept through the barracks at Fort Phil Kearny, a swift, merciless sickness that respected no uniform. He had left her utterly alone. Ellie had fled the East. She had fled the suffocating parlors of Boston, where grief was meant to be worn like a black silk shroud, quiet and ornamental and suffocating. Arthur had been her world, his purpose, her purpose. She had been the doctor's wife, her hands as skilled as his in binding wounds and mixing laudanum. Now, she was nothing, just a widow. The West, she had hoped, would offer not adventure, but air. She wanted a place big enough to hold the vast, aching emptiness inside her. She was searching for a purpose that was not just waiting for death. She was riding alone, a foolish, reckless thing to do. She had left the relative safety of Fort Rawlins 2 days prior, telling the commander she was heading south to the railroad line. It was a lie. She was just riding. She needed the silence, the unfiltered sun. She heard the shots hours ago, perhaps 3 or 4, a faint, rhythmic popping carried on the wind. Now, rounding a low rise, she saw the source. It was, or had been, a small supply wagon. Just one, likely a merchant or a homesteader, foolishly traveling without escort. It was now a skeleton of blackened wood, still smoking. The canvas top was gone, reduced to ash and black lace against the dirt. The 2 mules that had pulled it were dead in their harnesses, bristling with arrows. The air was thick with the copper smell of blood and the gray, choking dust of the fire. Her horse, a steady bay mare, snorted and shied, tasting the fear in the air. Ellie felt the familiar coldness settle in her stomach. She had seen this too many times in the field hospitals with Arthur. Death was not polite. It was messy and absolute. She dismounted, her boots sinking into the dust. She pulled the rifle from her saddle scabbard, a heavy Winchester, but she did not raise it. She moved with the practiced, quiet step of someone who had walked among the dying. She was looking for survivors, though she expected none. She saw the driver first, an older man, thrown clear of the wagon. He was missing his scalp. Near the wreckage lay a child's doll, face down in the dirt. Ellie's throat tightened. She forced herself to look away, to keep moving. This was the reality of the land she had chosen. She found him behind the overturned wagon, half buried beneath a pile of spilled sacks. He was not one of the settlers. He was Lakota. His body was lean and powerful, painted for war in streaks of yellow and black, but the paint was smeared with dirt and a great deal of blood. He was young, perhaps her own age, with a strong, proud face that was now pulled tight with agony. He was alive. His eyes, black and sharp as obsidian chips, snapped open and fixed on her. He held a knife, but his hand was weak, the blade trembling. He was the enemy. He was the man who had likely done this, who had killed the man and orphaned the doll. The thought should have made her run. It should have made her raise her rifle. But she saw the wound. He had a terrible injury in his left shoulder, high up, where a bullet had torn through muscle and bone. It was not an arrow. It was a soldier's bullet, or perhaps the wagon driver's. He was bleeding badly. A dark, pulsing stain spreading across his leather tunic and the ground beneath him. He was just a man, dying. Before she could speak, before her mind could reconcile the warrior with the patient, she heard them. Hoofbeats. Fast. 3 riders crested the same rise she had, their horses churning dust. They were not soldiers. They were white men, but they wore the hard, greasy look of men who lived by the gun and slept in their clothes. Bounty hunters. The leader, a heavy man with a beard stained by tobacco juice, reined in, his eyes sweeping the scene with a practiced, predatory gaze. He spat a brown stream onto the grass. "Well now, looks like the party's over. What we got here, little lady, you one of theirs?" He gestured with his rifle toward the dead driver. Ellie stood up slowly, her hands visible, deliberately away from her rifle. "No, I was riding from Fort Rollins. I saw the smoke." The man's eyes slid past her to the man on the ground. He squinted. "And what's that, a live one?" He dismounted, and a terrible, gap-toothed grin split his dirty face. "Scalp money's good, but a live buck, brought back to Rollins. That's better. By God, I know him. That's Tashunka. Hawk that rides. Escaped from the stockade 2 weeks back. Worth a $50 gold piece." The warrior, Tashunka, tried to raise himself onto his good arm. A low groan of hatred and pain escaped his lips. The bounty hunter laughed and kicked him, a brutal, careless motion that sent Tashunka sprawling back. "Not so high and mighty now. Are you, Hawk? We'll just take him." He uncoiled a rope from his saddle. Something inside Ellie Whitlock snapped. It was not courage. It was not righteousness. It was purpose. The solid, physical feeling she'd been chasing for 1,000 miles. "You cannot," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the wind. The 3 men stared at her. The leader laughed. A short, ugly bark. "I cannot, ma'am. You best step aside. This ain't your business." "He is my prisoner," Ellie said. The lie came to her, whole and sudden. Her voice shook, but she held her ground. The bounty hunter paused, the rope in his hand. "Your prisoner." "I am Eleanor Whitlock." She drew herself up, using her name and his like a shield. "My late husband was Dr. Arthur Whitlock of the 18th Infantry. This man is my guide. He was assigned to me. We were ambushed. He is wounded." It was a terrible lie, clumsy and thin as water. The men looked at each other, then back at her. The leader's eyes narrowed. He knew the name. A doctor's widow, an officer's widow, held a certain fragile status. But the story stank. "A Lakota guide, ma'am. You're either a fool or a liar." "I am not," Ellie said. She took a step, placing her body between the bounty hunter and Tashunka. "He is under my protection. He is wounded, and I am taking him back to the fort for questioning. If you take him, you are interfering with military business." The men hesitated. They were curs, not lions. They weighed the $50 against the trouble an officer's widow could cause. An official report. Questions from a commander. Paperwork. "He's Lakota," the leader grumbled, unwilling to let the money go. "He is wounded," Ellie repeated, her voice turning to ice. "And he is mine. Leave now." The leader spat again, his eyes full of malice. He looked at Tashunka, then at her. "He ain't worth the trouble. Keep him, ma'am, but when he cuts your throat and takes your hair while you sleep, do not blame us. It's your funeral." He mounted his horse. "And we'll be telling the patrol at Fort Rollins we saw you out here, playing nurse to a redskin. They'll be mighty interested to hear your story." They wheeled their horses and rode off, leaving a cloud of dust and the stench of their unwashed bodies. The silence that fell was heavier than the smoke, broken only by the whine of the wind and the pained, shallow breathing of the man on the ground. Ellie turned back to him. She sank to her knees, her legs suddenly weak. Tashunka was watching her. The fire in his eyes was banked, the hatred overshadowed by a sharp, burning confusion. She reached for the medical bag strapped to her own saddle. It was Arthur's bag, filled with his tools, his salves, his smell. "I am going to help you," she said, speaking slowly, clearly. "I am a healer. Do you understand, healer?" He said nothing. He just watched her. His hand was still on his knife. Tashunka felt the world tilt. He was hawk that rides. He had escaped the white man's prison, the place of gray walls and sick air, to lead his people away from the iron road, back to the Paha Sapa, the sacred Black Hills. He had found this wagon. He had fought, and he had been shot. Not by the driver, but by the soldiers who had been tracking him. He had fallen here, waiting for death or the crows. Then she had appeared, a white woman, Wasiku, the enemy. He had watched her lie to the other men, the ones who smelled of old pelts and whiskey. She had used her words as a weapon, turning them away. Why, it was a trick. It had to be a trick. The white people only spoke in lies. They had lied about the treaties. They had lied about the sickness they brought. Now she was opening a bag. He smelled the sharp, clean scent of medicine. It was the same smell from the Fort Hospital, the place his mother had died, coughing up her lungs. He tensed, his good hand gripping his knife. "This will hurt," Ellie said, more to herself than to him. She took her shears and, with a firm hand, cut away the blood-stiffened leather of his tunic. The wound was raw and deep. The bullet was still in him. She could see the edge of the lead lodged against the bone of his shoulder. It was ugly. Infection would set in within hours. "I have to clean it," she said. She uncorked a small bottle of carbolic acid, diluted with water. "This will burn." She poured it. Tashunka hissed, a sharp intake of breath that was the only sound he would allow himself. His entire body went rigid. It was white man's fire, a cold, searing agony that dwarfed the bullet's pain. He closed his eyes, his mind traveling to the plains, to the back of his horse, to the feel of the wind. He would not scream. He would not give her that. Ellie worked quickly, her hands steady. This, she understood. The clean line of a suture, the architecture of the human body. This was her purpose. She was all doctor's apprentice now. Her grief and fear pushed aside, she saw the torn deltoid, the network of nerves, the dark, venous blood. "I have to get the bullet out," she said. She retrieved her husband's probe and a small set of forceps. "I have laudanum. For the pain. Drink this." She held a small vial to his lips. He stared at the bottle, then at her. He shook his head, a short, sharp motion. "It will help you," she insisted. He clamped his lips shut. He would take no potions from her. "Then you will have to bear it," she said, her voice tight. "Hold still!" She braced herself. She found the lead with the probe. She felt the scrape of the metal against the bone. He grunted, his body lifting off the ground. But he did not fight her. She slid the forceps in, following the probe. Her hands were steady. She gripped the metal. "Breathe," she commanded. She pulled. The bullet came free with a sickening sound, a wet pop. She dropped it, heavy and misshapen and bloody, onto a piece of clean cloth. Tashunka fell back, his face pale beneath the paint, slick with sweat. His breathing was a ragged rasp. Ellie did not pause. She took her needle, already threaded with clean gut. She began to stitch the wound closed, her movements economical and precise. Her hands, which had trembled when lying to the bounty hunters, were now perfectly still. She was saving a man who might have killed the people in this wagon. She was saving a man her husband's army was paid to hunt. The thought made her feel dizzy, a strange lightness in her head. But as she tied the last knot, she felt not guilt. She felt, for the first time in a year, the solid weight of life and death in her hands. She was redeeming something. She did not know what. When she was finished, she bandaged the wound tightly with clean linen, packing it with a salve. The sun was beginning to drop, a bloody smear across the western sky, painting the clouds in shades of apricot and violet. The wagon skeletons cast long, jagged shadows across the prairie. She had to move him. He could not stay here. He was weak, his eyes half closed, but he was watching her. "Can you stand?" she asked. He tried. He pushed himself up with his good arm, his legs shaking. He made it to his knees before the world swam, and he pitched forward. Ellie caught him. She was strong, but he was a heavy, solid weight of muscle and bone. She felt his skin, hot with fever, through his tunic. She felt the sudden, shocking intimacy of his body against hers. He smelled of sweat and leather and the smoke from the fire. He recoiled, pushing her away, and staggered to his feet. He swayed, but he stood. She brought her horse. "You will ride," she said. "I will walk." He looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. He was a warrior, but he was at her mercy. He was alive because she had willed it. He hated her for it, and he was grateful. The two emotions tore at him. He pulled himself onto her saddle, his face white with the effort. Ellie took the reins. She did not know where they were going. She only knew they could not stay here. She began to walk, leading the horse away from the ruin, away from the dead. They found a shallow ravine as the last light faded, a small wash hidden by cottonwoods. It would offer shelter from the wind. She helped him down, and he collapsed against the dirt bank. She built a small fire, using dry branches and pieces of the shattered wagon she had carried. The fire was a small, brave circle of light in a vast, dangerous dark. She sat on the other side of it, her rifle across her lap. Tashunka lay still, his eyes closed, but she knew he was not asleep. He was listening. She was listening. Every coyote howl, every rustle of the wind in the grass, made her heart jump. She looked at the warrior, and he opened his eyes. Looking at her, they were two people from different worlds, trapped by blood and a lie. The only sound was the prairie wind and the crackle of the fire. A thin line of smoke, gray and stubborn, rose from their small fire, twisting up into the cooling, starlit air. It rose between the two of them, a fragile column connecting the dark earth to the endless sky, a silent testament to two lives that did not belong in the same world. Dawn broke gray and cold, leaching the color from the high plains. The small fire had died hours ago, leaving a circle of pale ash. Ellie Whitlock had not slept. She sat with her back against the cool dirt wall of the ravine, the heavy Winchester rifle resting across her knees. Every muscle ached with a cold, wire-tight tension. Across the ashes, Tashunka was awake. He had not slept either. He sat upright, his back straight. Despite the agony, she knew his shoulder must be causing him. The fever had taken hold. She could see it in the unnatural brightness of his eyes and the sheen of sweat on his skin. Even in the morning chill, he had not spoken a single word to her. He just watched, his gaze a heavy, unreadable weight. He was a hawk, tethered and wounded, but a hawk nonetheless. The silence between them was absolute, filled only by the whisper of the wind over the lip of the ravine. She had saved his life. He was her prisoner. She was his captive. All three statements were true, and all of them were false. The sound came suddenly, not from the plains above, but from the mouth of the wash, the clink of a bridle, the low snort of a horse, the crunch of boots on gravel. Tashunka was on his feet in a single, fluid motion, his good hand gripping the knife he had never let go of. The movement cost him. A sharp gasp of air hissed through his teeth, and his face went pale. But he stood, planting himself in front of her. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing her rifle, her mouth dry with sudden fear. 4 men in blue uniforms appeared, their carbines leveled. They were a patrol, their faces hard and bearded and dusty. "Hold right there," the sergeant commanded. His eyes taking in the scene, he saw the white woman, her fine Eastern clothes stained with dirt and blood. Then he saw the Lakota warrior, painted and wounded, standing in defiance. The sergeant's face hardened. Mrs. Whitlock, what in God's name is this step away from him, now? Before Ellie could speak, a fifth man pushed past the soldiers. He was younger than the others, clean-shaven, with pale blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore the shoulder bars of a lieutenant. He moved with a restless, coiled energy. He looked at Tashunka, his gaze sharp and assessing. He recognized him. "Tashunka," he said, his voice quiet, almost pleased. "Hawk that rides. We have been looking for you." His eyes shifted to Ellie. The hardness did not leave them, but a veneer of courtesy was thinly applied. "Lieutenant Nathan Cole, ma'am, at your service. We were alerted by some trappers. They said they saw you out here with company." He gestured to Tashunka. "Lieutenant," Ellie said, her voice unsteady. She forced herself to stand tall, to reclaim the authority of her husband's name. "Thank God you are here. We were ambushed yesterday, at the wagon." Lieutenant Cole's gaze swept over her. "Ambushed, you say, by whom?" I do not know. It happened so fast," she lied. "I see." He looked at Tashunka, who stared back at him, his black eyes flat and filled with a cold, pure hatred. "And this one, he was part of the ambush." "No," Ellie said, the word coming out too fast. "He is with me. He is my guide. He was wounded protecting me." The lie felt even thinner in the clear morning light. A brief, cold smile touched Nathan Cole's lips. He was not the fool the bounty hunters had been. "Your guide, Mrs. Whitlock, a Lakota warrior Tashunka himself. That is a very unusual arrangement, especially since he escaped the stockade at Fort Rawlins 2 weeks ago, after killing a guard." Ellie's blood ran cold. "I did not know that," she whispered. "He was assigned to me by a man at the fort, a scout." "Was he?" Cole said. It was not a question. He knew she was lying. He could see it, smell it, but she was still Dr. Whitlock's widow, a white woman, a lady, and he was an officer. There were rules, even out here. "He is gravely wounded, Lieutenant," Ellie pressed, falling back on the one truth she had. "He needs medical attention. He saved my life." "He is a murderer and an enemy of the United States Army," Cole said, his voice flat. "He is my prisoner. Sergeant, bind him." "No," Ellie cried, stepping in front of Tashunka. "He cannot ride like that. His shoulder, I just operated on him. The bindings will kill him." Tashunka watched her. He did not understand her words, but he understood her action. She was protecting him again, from her own people. The confusion in his mind was a painful, burning thing, almost as hot as the fever. Cole looked at her, his pale eyes unblinking. He was weighing his options. He had his prize. He could not be seen to mistreat a white woman, a widow of an officer, but her defense of this savage was a deep offense. "Very well, Mrs. Whitlock," he said, his voice dangerously smooth. "We will all return to Fort Rawlins together. You, your guide, and my patrol. You will ride, and he can ride. My men will keep a very close watch on him. And you can explain your fascinating story to the colonel in person." He turned away. "Sergeant, get them mounted. Tie his good hand to the saddle horn. If he makes a single move, shoot him." The journey was a slow, agonizing crawl through hell. They made Tashunka ride Ellie's mare, while Ellie was given one of the soldiers' spare mounts. The soldiers clearly resented this, and they resented her. They rode in a tight, hostile formation, 2 in front, 2 behind, with Ellie and Tashunka in the middle. Lieutenant Cole rode beside Ellie, his silence a constant, pressing weight. The soldiers talked, their voices loud and crude, meant for both her and Tashunka to hear. They talked about the bounties, about the dead driver at the wagon, about what they did to captured squaws. They treated Tashunka not as a human being, but as a particularly vicious animal they had trapped. "Look at him," one of the men, a corporal with a tobacco-stained beard, said, "Spitting, proud buck, ain't he? Bet he'd like a drink." He rode close and pretended to offer his canteen, only to snatch it away, laughing, "Thirsty! Hawk, flap your wings." Tashunka did not react. He rode bolt upright, his face a mask of stone. He seemed to be looking past them, at the horizon, at the endless rolling sea of grass that was his home. But Ellie, riding beside him, could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. She could see the sweat on his brow, the way his body swayed with the horse's gait, a sign of the fever and the blood he had lost. She saw the pain, but she also saw something else. In his eyes, as he looked at the soldiers, was a cold, ancient sorrow. It was not just his own pain. It was the pain of his people, the grief of 1,000 stolen lands, 1,000 broken promises. He was silent, but his silence was louder than all their jeers. "Lieutenant," Ellie said, her voice tight with fury, unable to bear it another second. "Tell your men to be quiet." Cole turned his head, his pale eyes fixing on her. "My men are in high spirits. Mrs. Whitlock, they have captured a dangerous fugitive, and they are protecting you." "They are tormenting a wounded man," she said. "He is a Lakota, ma'am, not a man, in the way you or I understand it. He is a savage. You would do well to remember that. This misplaced compassion of yours is what gets settlers killed." His words struck her like a physical blow. She fell silent, shamed and furious. She looked at Tashunka, but his face was turned away. They rode for hours. The sun beat down, a merciless hammer. Tashunka's wound, she knew, must be on fire. He needed water. He needed to rest. He needed his bandages changed. He would get none of it. They made camp as the sun set, a low, bloody smear in the west. They stopped in a shallow draw, near a small, muddy creek. Cole had his men build a large fire. He was not afraid of being seen. He had a patrol of 5, and he had his prize. They bound Tashunka's hands and feet and tied him to a wagon wheel they had been hauling for repairs. They threw him a piece of hardtack, which he ignored. Ellie sat apart, near her saddle, clutching her medical bag. She felt like a prisoner herself. Cole posted 2 guards, one on Tashunka, one on the horses, the other 2, and the lieutenant tried to sleep. The night was heavy and still. The moon was a thin sliver, offering almost no light. The fire crackled, casting huge, dancing shadows. Ellie watched Tashunka. He was leaning against the wheel, his eyes closed, but his breathing was too shallow. The fever was winning. She had to do something. She stood up and walked toward him, her medical bag in her hand. The guard on him, the same corporal who had taunted him, leveled his rifle. "That's far enough, ma'am." "He is my patient," Ellie said, her voice low and firm. "His fever is high. I need to change his dressing and give him water, or he will be dead by morning, and Lieutenant Cole will not get to present his prize to the colonel." The guard hesitated. He looked over at Cole, who was wrapped in his bedroll, apparently asleep. The guard did not want to wake him. He grunted, "Fine, but I am watching you. Both of you." Ellie knelt beside Tashunka. She untied the knot on the canteen at her waist and held it to his lips. His lips were cracked and dry. He looked at her, his eyes clouded with fever but still sharp. He drank, slowly, deeply. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if he understood. She set the canteen down and opened her bag. Pulling out clean linen, she gently began to unwrap the bloody bandage on his shoulder. That was when the world exploded. A volley of arrows hissed out of the darkness, silent and deadly. One struck the guard beside her. He made a choked, sighing sound and fell forward, an arrow protruding from his throat. The other guard, the one by the horses, screamed. It was cut short by a second arrow. Hoofbeats thundered into the camp, accompanied by high, terrifying yips and war cries. They were not Lakota. Their paint was different. Their cries were different. Comanche. A war party, maybe 10 or 12. Drawn by the fire. Nathan Cole was on his feet instantly, his revolver in his hand. "To arms!" he yelled, firing into the dark mass of riders circling the camp. The two remaining soldiers scrambled for their rifles. One of them, a young private, did not make it. A Comanche warrior on a painted pony rode him down. A war club rising and falling. It was chaos. Horses screamed, men shouted. Gunshots flashed red in the dark. Ellie was frozen, kneeling over Tashunka, who was still tied to the wheel. A rider galloped past, leaning down, his painted face a mask of fury. He swung his club at her. Tashunka threw his body sideways, pulling the heavy wheel with him. The club missed Ellie's head by an inch, striking the wooden spokes with a crack. Cole and the last remaining soldier, the sergeant, were back to back, firing their rifles into the swirling mass. "They're after the horses," Cole yelled. Tashunka was struggling against his bonds, his eyes blazing. He was not watching the fight. He was watching Ellie. Another warrior, this one on foot, ran into the firelight, his knife held high. He saw Ellie, a prize, and lunged for her. "Ellie!" Cole shouted, but he was too far away, his rifle empty. Tashunka roared. It was not a human sound. It was the cry of the hawk he was named for. With a surge of desperate, fevered strength, he snapped the leather bindings on his wrists. The rope had been weakened by his sweat and blood. He was free. He was on his feet, the knife he had hidden in his boot, now in his good hand. He met the Comanche's charge. Ellie watched, horrified. It was not a fight, it was a butchering. Tashunka, despite his wound, moved like a shadow. He slipped inside the man's lunge, his knife moving twice, a blur, once under the ribs, once across the throat. The Comanche warrior fell, his life gushing into the dirt. Tashunka did not pause. He saw the sergeant go down, an arrow in his back. He saw Nathan Cole fighting with his saber against two warriors at once. He grabbed the dead sergeant's rifle. He was a warrior. These were Comanche, his ancestral enemies. But the soldiers were also his enemies. He turned and saw Cole stumble, one of the warriors knocking his saber aside. The other raised his lance for a killing blow. Tashunka fired the rifle. The shot was deafening. The Comanche with the lance clutched his chest and fell. Cole stared, his face a mask of shock. The man he had tied to a wheel had just saved his life. The last Comanche, seeing his partner fall, turned to flee. Tashunka raised the rifle again. He fired, and the man dropped. The attack had lasted less than a minute. The remaining Comanche riders, seeing their leader fall, let out a wail and galloped away, melting back into the darkness. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by the groans of the dying and the crackle of the fire. 3 soldiers were dead. The sergeant was dying. Ellie ran to him, but it was no use. The arrow was too deep. Tashunka stood in the center of the camp, the smoking rifle in his hand. He had killed 1 Comanche with his knife, and 2 with the rifle. He had also, in the chaos, saved Nathan Cole's life. Ellie looked at him, her hands covered in the sergeant's blood. Her mind was screaming. She had seen him kill the man she had saved. The man she had nursed was a killer. He had moved with a speed and brutality that turned her stomach. This was the savage Cole had warned her about. But he had saved her. He had saved Cole. Her humanitarian instincts were at war with the bloody reality of survival. Tashunka looked at her, his chest heaving. The fever, the fight, and the wound had taken everything from him. He swayed on his feet, the rifle suddenly too heavy. Behind him, a shadow rose. One of the Comanche warriors, the one Tashunka had knifed, was not dead. He had been playing dead. He rose up, his face a smear of blood and hatred, his own knife raised. He was going to stab Tashunka in the back. Tashunka could not see him. Cole was too far away, reloading his revolver. "Up behind you!" Ellie screamed. But he was too weak, too slow to turn. Ellie did not think. She did not feel. She acted. Her own Winchester rifle was on the ground. Where she had dropped it, she grabbed it, raised it, and pulled the trigger. The shot was a flat, hard crack. The Comanche warrior stiffened, a look of profound surprise on his face. He looked down at the new, dark hole in his chest. Then he fell forward, dead for good. Ellie stood there, the rifle smoking in her hands. The smell of gunpowder was acrid in her nose. Tashunka turned. Slowly, he saw the dead warrior at his feet. He looked at Ellie. Nathan Cole stood frozen, his revolver half-loaded. He stared at her, his pale eyes wide with a new, terrible understanding. Ellie had just killed a man. She had killed a man to save the life of the Lakota warrior her people called an enemy. The firelight flickered on the three of them, the living surrounded by the dead. The blood on the prairie was a dark, glistening stain. Ellie let the rifle fall from her numb fingers. She had crossed a line, and she knew, with a terrible, sinking certainty, that she could never, ever go back. The echo of Ellie's rifle shot was swallowed by the plains, leaving a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped breathing. The fire crackled, spitting sparks onto the dead. Nathan Cole stood frozen, his revolver in his hand, half-loaded. His pale eyes were fixed on Ellie, not with gratitude, but with a new, sharp, and terrifying intensity. He was not looking at a widow. He was looking at a woman who had just killed a man to save a Lakota fugitive. Tashunka stared at her. His fevered mind struggled to understand the image. This white woman, this Waziku, who smelled of medicine and lies, had just saved his life for the second time. She had taken a life to protect his. He was the first to move. The moment was broken. Survival, sharp and cold, cut through his fevered haze. Cole was the enemy. The camp was a graveyard. He grabbed Ellie's arm, his good hand gripping her like a vice. His touch was hard, impersonal, a shock of heat against her frozen skin. "No," he grunted, the first word he had ever spoken directly to her. He did not pull her toward him, but shoved her toward her own rifle, which lay on the ground. Cole snapped out of his shock. "Halt!" he commanded, his voice raw. "You are both my prisoners' misses. Whitlock, you are under arrest for, he did not know what to call it. Tashunka ignored him. He scooped up Ellie's rifle and shoved it back into her hands. He ran to the horse line. The animals were screaming, pulling at their tethers. His knife flashed, cutting the reins of the dead sergeant's mount. He grabbed the reins of Ellie's mare. "Get on," he yelled at her. Ellie was numb, moving in a dream. She heard Cole's shout, saw him raise his revolver. She put her foot in the stirrup and hauled herself onto the saddle. Tashunka vaulted onto the bare back of the soldier's horse, a fluid motion that cost him dearly. A strangled groan of pain ripped from his chest as his wounded shoulder screamed. "I said halt," Cole fired. The bullet snapped through the air, whining past Tashunka's head. So close he felt the heat of it. Tashunka did not flinch. He kicked his horse, grabbing the lead rope of Ellie's mare, and yanked. The horse lunged, pulling Ellie with him. They galloped out of the firelight, out of the circle of death, and vanished into the vast, swallowing darkness of the prairie. Lieutenant Nathan Cole stood alone in the wreckage. The fire illuminated the grotesque tableau. His 4 dead soldiers, the scattered bodies of the Comanche, the puddles of dark blood soaking into the thirsty earth. His entire patrol was gone. His high-value prisoner, the man who would have been his triumph, was gone. And he had been stolen by a woman, a white woman. an officer's widow who had betrayed her own kind. The humiliation was a physical, burning thing, hotter than the fire. He was ruined. He looked down at the dead sergeant, his face frozen in a final grimace. "I will find you," Nathan Cole whispered, his voice shaking with a cold, righteous fury. "I do not care where you run. I will hunt you to the Black Hills. I will hunt you to the gates of hell. I will see you both hang." They rode north. They rode until the horses were lathered and blowing, until Ellie's legs were numb from gripping the saddle. Tashunka did not slow. He seemed to be navigating by the stars, by the feel of the wind. He was pushing them relentlessly north, toward the dark, jagged line of hills that rose from the prairie like a fortress. The Paha Sapa, the sacred Black Hills. When the sky began to pale in the east, he finally stopped. He slid from the horse's back, his legs buckling. He fell to his knees, his body shaking violently. The fever, held at bay by the fight and the flight, had returned with a vengeance. Ellie dismounted, her own body a collection of aches. She saw him collapse and the healer in her took over, pushing aside the numb shock of the night. "You must rest," she said, her voice hoarse. She grabbed her canteen and her medical bag. He was too weak to protest. He allowed her to help him to the base of a small, rocky outcropping. She gave him water, which he drank greedily. She unwrapped the bandage on his shoulder. The wound was angry, red and swollen. The stitches were holding, but the flesh around them was hot to the touch. The ride had been brutal on him. "This is infected," she said, more to herself than to him. She had almost no carbolic acid left, just a few precious drops. She used it to clean the wound again. He hissed, his body rigid, but he did not pull away. He watched her, his eyes bright with fever, his expression a mask of pain and profound confusion. They hid there for the rest of the day. They had no food and very little water. They had 2 horses, 2 rifles, and the clothes on their backs. "Where are we going?" Ellie asked, as she repacked her bag. Tashunka had his back against the rock, his eyes closed. He waited a long time before answering. "Home," he said, his voice a low rasp. "My people are there, hiding, waiting for me." "The Black Hills," she said. His eyes snapped open. "It is sacred land, the land of our spirits. The white man is forbidden." "I am a white woman," she said simply. "Yes," he said. His gaze held hers. "You are." The word hung in the air between them, an accusation and a simple fact. They traveled for 3 more days, moving only at night, hiding during the day. The journey stripped away everything Ellie had been. She was no longer a widow, no longer a lady. She was a fugitive, and she was a student. Tashunka, despite his fever and his wound, was a different man in this wilderness. He was not the savage Cole had described. He was a part of the land itself. He taught her, not with words, but with impatient gestures and quiet example. He showed her how to find water, not by looking for a river, but by watching for a certain shade of green in the low places, where water slept just beneath the dry earth. He taught her to walk without sound, placing her feet heel to toe. On the 3rd day, they were starving. Ellie's stomach was a hollow, aching knot. Tashunka stopped, his head cocked. He pointed. Ellie saw nothing but dry grass. He slipped away, his knife in his good hand. He was gone for 10 minutes. He returned with a rabbit. He skinned it with a few precise, economical movements. He built a small fire in a deep crevice, using dry wood that produced almost no smoke. He roasted the meat. He handed her the first piece. She looked at the bloody, fire-blackened flesh. The Ellie of Boston would have retched. The Ellie of Fort Rawlins would have wept. The Ellie of the High Plains took it, whispered, "Thank you," and ate. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. He was not a savage. He was a survivor. He lived in a harmony with this brutal land that she found both terrifying and beautiful. She realized, with a cold, clear shock, that in this world, she was the savage. She was the one who was helpless, loud, and ignorant. She was the one who did not belong. The land grew harder as they climbed into the foothills. The nights grew colder. One night, they were awakened by a new sound, a low, long howl, answered by another, and another, a wolf pack. Ellie's blood froze. The fire was low. Tushunka was on his feet, his rifle in his hand. "Stay by the fire," he commanded. They came, shadows in the moonlight, their eyes glowing green in the dark. There were at least 8 of them, lean and gray and desperate. They circled the small camp, drawn by the scent of the horses. "Fire over their heads," Tushunka said, his voice calm. "Scare them." Ellie raised her rifle, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She fired. The shot echoed, and the wolves fell back. But they did not leave. They were too hungry. One, bolder than the rest, darted in. Tushunka fired. The wolf yelped, a high, pained sound, and fell, its legs kicking. The pack leader, a huge black male, lunged. It was not aiming for the horses. It was aiming for Ellie. Tushunka threw himself in front of her, his wounded shoulder be damned. He used his rifle as a club, swinging it with his good arm. He met the wolf's charge. The stock of the rifle connecting with the animal's head with a sickening crack. The wolf dropped. The rest of the pack, seeing their leader fall, turned and vanished into the darkness. Silence. Again. Tushunka was breathing heavily, leaning on the rifle. Ellie looked at the 2 dead wolves. "My God," she whispered. Tushunka walked to the black wolf. He pulled his knife. "The land provides," he said. He began the work of skinning it. Ellie turned away, her stomach roiling. "You will eat," he said, not looking up. His voice was flat. "Or you will die. The wolf understands this. You must, too." He roasted the dark, stringy meat. It tasted of blood and desperation, but it was hot, and it stopped the shaking in her hands. 2 days later, the sky turned the color of a fresh bruise, a low, oppressive, yellowish gray. The wind stopped. The air became heavy and dead. Tushunka stopped, his head raised. He sniffed the air. "It comes," he said. "What?" "The storm." It began not with flakes, but with a fine, hard ice that stung their faces. Within an hour, the world was gone, erased by a blinding, howling wall of white. The snow was so thick, Ellie could not see her own horse's head. The temperature plummeted. "We must find shelter!" she screamed over the wind. Tushunka was barely visible, a ghost just ahead of her. He was leading them into a small canyon, his eyes scanning the rock walls. He found it, a shallow cave, more of a deep overhang, partially hidden by a stand of snow-blasted pines. "In here!" he yelled. They pushed the horses into the back of the cave, where they stood, miserable and shivering. Tushunka used the last of their dry wood to build a fire. They huddled close to it, the blizzard shrieking outside like a living, malevolent thing. They were trapped. The storm raged for a day, and then a second. The world was reduced to the small, smoky cave, the howl of the wind, and the bone-deep cold. On the 3rd day, the fire was almost gone, and their hunger was a raw, physical pain. Ellie was going through her medical bag, looking for anything, a stray biscuit, a piece of jerky. There was nothing. Her fingers brushed against the oilcloth cover of her husband's field journal. She had packed it, along with his bag, without thinking. She had not opened it since his death. Now, trapped, with nothing but the sound of the wind and the shadow of starvation, she pulled it out. She opened it to the last page. Tucked inside was a letter, folded neatly. It was not to her. It was addressed to his father, a colleague at a Boston medical college. It was dated just a month before his death. She began to read, her husband's precise, familiar handwriting blurring in the dim light. And so, Father, the cholera here is manageable, but the true challenge remains the native problem. They are, as we discussed, incompatible with the necessary expansion of our civilization. The Army's methods are crude and inefficient. We, as men of science, must seek a more elegant solution. Ellie's blood ran cold. She read on. I have taken the liberty of continuing your research. I secured several blankets from the smallpox infirmary at St. Louis. We introduced them to a Kiowa band that was trading near the fort. The results are promising. The mortality rate appears to be in excess of 70%. It is a harsh necessity, I admit, but progress demands such sacrifices. I feel no guilt. It is, in its way, a form of healing. We are lancing a boil. Ellie made a low, strangled sound. She dropped the letter as if it were on fire. The man she had loved. The gentle, compassionate healer who had taught her how to set a bone, how to suture a wound. Her Arthur, he was a monster. He was a butcher. He had deliberately, scientifically, murdered men, women, and children. The sickness she had felt for killing the Comanche was nothing compared to this. This was a soul sickness. Tashunka was watching her. He had been watching her since she opened the book. He saw the color drain from her face. He saw the letter fall to the dirt floor. He reached over with his good hand and picked it up. He could not read the Wasiku script, but he recognized the signature she had been staring at. Dr. Arthur Whitlock. He had seen the name on her medical bag. He looked at her. His dark eyes narrowed. Your husband, he said. It was not a question. Ellie could not speak. She could only nod, her body shaking with silent sobs. He held the letter out. He pointed to the name. Then he pointed outside, to the land, and made a sweeping gesture. A gesture for people. Then he made the Lakota sign for sickness, for the pox, a brushing of the hands over the face and body. Medicine man, Tashunka said, his voice deadly quiet. He gave sickness. She looked at him, her eyes wide with horror and a terrible, shared understanding. She could not lie, not to him, not about this. She nodded again. Yes, she whispered. The air in the cave changed, the small warmth they had built. The trust forged in blood and survival, shattered. Tashunka's face, which had softened toward her, became a mask of stone, but his eyes burned with a white-hot, ancestral rage. This was the source of his people's suffering. This was the enemy, and she was his wife. She was his flesh. He did not yell. He did not move. He simply held the letter over the dying fire. No, Ellie whispered, reaching out. He let it fall. The paper browned, curled, and caught. The neat scientific script blackening and turning to ash. Tashunka stood up. He grabbed his rifle. Where are you going? She cried. I will not die with the butcher's wife, he said, his voice thick with hatred. Tashunka, know the storm you will die. It is a better death. He turned and walked out of the cave, into the white, roaring mouth of the blizzard. Ellie was alone, utterly, completely alone, with the ashes of her husband's confession and the howl of the wind. She sat for a moment, frozen. She could stay here and die of cold, or she could go out there and die of cold. But she could not let him go. He was all that was left. He was the only person in this world who had seen her for what she was. And she had seen him. Tashunka! She screamed, her voice snatched away by the wind. She grabbed her own rifle and her bag and ran out after him. The world was chaos. She could not see 10 feet. The snow was up to her knees, a thick, heavy powder that pulled at her legs. Tashunka! She saw a dark shape, moving. 20 yards ahead, she stumbled after him. Please wait! He did not look back. She fell, her frozen dress tripping her. She got up, the wind tearing the breath from her lungs. The cold was a physical, solid thing. a knife in her chest. She fell again. This time, it was harder to get up. She was so tired. The wind sounded like a lullaby. It would be so easy to just lie down, to sleep. She saw his shape stop, far ahead. He was looking back. Or was he? She could not be sure. "Tashunka," she whispered, the word freezing on her lips. She tried to push herself up, but her arms would not obey. The world, which had been a blinding white, was turning a soft, peaceful gray. She collapsed into a snowdrift and felt the darkness take her. He had walked, his rage a fire in his belly. He was a fool, a blind fool. He had trusted her. He had let her touch him. He had protected her, the wife of the man who had brought the pox. He heard her call his name. He kept walking. He heard her fall. He kept walking. Let the storm take her. It was justice. It was what she deserved. He stopped. He stood in the middle of the roaring white, his heart at war with his mind. He remembered her hands, steady and clean on his wound. He remembered her standing between him and the bounty hunters. He remembered the crack of her rifle, and the Comanche warrior falling, dead, at his feet. He was Lakota, he was Tashunka. He did not leave a woman, any woman, to die in the snow. He cursed her name. He cursed his own weakness. He turned back. He found her. She was almost completely buried, just a dark patch of her cloak visible. He knelt, his face hard. He brushed the snow from her face. She was pale as the snow itself, her lips blue. He could barely feel her breath. "Fool Wasiku woman," he growled. He slipped his good arm under her knees and his wounded arm under her back. The pain in his shoulder was a white-hot fire, but he ignored it. He lifted her. She was a dead weight. He carried her back to the cave. He laid her gently by the pathetic, dying fire. He used the last of their wood, breaking it with his hands, piling it on the embers. He blew on them, his own breath feeding the small, growing flame. He rubbed her hands, her face. He unfastened his cloak and wrapped her in his own dry, warm buffalo robe, pulling her body close to the growing fire. He sat back on his heels, watching her. The blizzard shrieked outside, a sound of madness. Inside, the firelight grew, casting flickering, orange shadows on the stone walls. The light played across his face, hard and conflicted, and across hers, pale and still, in the tiny, fragile bubble of warmth. His breath, hot and alive, mingled in the frozen air with her own shallow, ghostly vapor. The cave was a pocket of smoky semi-darkness, a frantic, fragile defense against the roaring white madness outside. Tashunka fed the fire with the last of the wood, stick by stick, nursing the embers back to a greedy, dancing flame. He had broken the last of the pine branches with his good hand, his wounded shoulder a white-hot spike of agony. He ignored it. He looked at the woman. She lay where he had put her, wrapped in his buffalo robe, pale and utterly still. The wife of the butcher, the woman who had followed him into the blizzard, the woman who had saved his life, and whom he, in turn, had just saved. His mind was a battlefield. His rage was a clean, sharp knife, demanding he leave her to the storm, a just payment for the pox blankets and the dead children. But his body, his spirit, had refused. He had carried her back. The Lakota way was that he was now responsible for her. He had taken her fate from the storm, and now it belonged to him. It was a burden that weighed more than her body. Ellie surfaced from the darkness slowly, as if swimming up from a deep, frozen ocean. She was not aware of thought, only sensation. Cold, a cold so deep it had burrowed into her bones. Her body was a single, violent shiver, a desperate, failing attempt to generate heat. She moaned, her eyes flickering open. The light of the fire was a blurry, orange smear. She saw a shape, dark and solid, sitting between her and the flames. "Tashunka?" Her voice was a dry, broken whisper. He did not answer. He was watching her, his face a mask of stone in the firelight, his eyes holding the banked embers of his rage. "I am so cold," she whispered. The shivering was uncontrollable, shaking her so hard her teeth rattled. She tried to pull the buffalo robe tighter, but her fingers were numb. Useless. The fire was only 10 feet away, but it felt like a mile. She was dying. She could feel the life packing itself up, ready to leave. She looked at him. He was the only other living thing. He was heat. He was life. She pushed herself up onto one elbow, a movement that took all her strength. "Please," she begged, the word tearing from her throat. She was not a lady. She was not a widow. She was just an animal, desperate to survive. "I am freezing. Please, let me feel your warmth." She was delirious, her mind fogged with fever and cold. But her instinct was sharp and true. This was not a plea for comfort. It was a plea for life. Tashunka stared at her. Everything in him, every lesson, every scar, screamed to move away. She was Wasiku. She was the poison. But he saw her. He saw the blue tinge of her lips, the violent, uncontrolled spasms of her body. He saw that she was not the butcher. She was just a woman, dying in his cave. He had brought her here. He cursed, a low, guttural sound. He had not saved her from the storm, only to let the cold take her by his fire. He moved, not with gentleness, but with a swift, angry decisiveness. He crossed the space between them and sat on the cold stone floor, his back against the cave wall. He grabbed her, his good arm pulling her roughly against him. He was rigid, his entire body tight with resistance. But she was still shivering, a bird trapped in his arms. It was not enough. With another growl of self-disgust, he unfolded the thick buffalo robe and spread it wide. Pulling her down to lie beside him, he wrapped it around them both, pulling the heavy, furred hide over their heads, creating a small, dark, breathing tent of shared space. He lay on his wounded side, the pain a searing fire, but he did not move. He was made of stone. Ellie was pressed against him. The shock of his body was overwhelming. He was solid and hard and radiating a fierce, animal heat. He smelled of smoke and pine and sweat and something else. Something uniquely him. She pressed herself closer, not with intent, but with the blind, desperate instinct of a freezing animal. She pushed her face into the leather of his tunic, his chest a solid wall against her cheek. She could feel his heart, a slow, powerful, steady beat beneath her ear. Thump, thump, thump. The shivering did not stop at once, but the violent edges of it began to soften. His heat was a poultice, pulling the ice from her bones. He held her, rigid and hateful, furious at the intimacy, furious at his own choice. He was holding the world that had destroyed his, and yet his body betrayed him. His arm, the good one, lay across her back, a heavy, protective weight. He could feel the smallness of her, the fragility of her bones. He could feel the frantic, rapid beat of her heart as it raced against his own. She was so cold. And for Ellie, pressed against this man, this enemy, this savior, the guilt of her husband's letter mixed with the primal, overwhelming gratitude for the life beating against her. This was her atonement. She was clinging to the very people her husband had tried to erase, and she was drawing life from them. The lines were not just blurred. They were gone. They lay like that for hours. Two enemies bound by a buffalo robe, listening to the blizzard scream its rage outside the cave. They did not speak. There were no words for this. There was only the sound of the wind, the crackle of the fire, and the two hearts beating against each other in the dark. When the world grew light, the wind had died. The silence was as profound as the storm had been. Ellie woke first. She was warm. Her fever had broken, leaving her weak and drenched in sweat. But the bone chill was gone. She was tangled with him. her leg thrown over his, her hand clutching the front of his tunic. She pulled back as if burned, scrambling out of the robe, her face flooding with heat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Tashunka was already moving, his face hard, his eyes averted. He did not look at her. The shared night, the forced intimacy, was a deep shame between them. He stood up, his body stiff, and went to the mouth of the cave. The world was remade. The storm had passed, leaving a landscape of impossible, glittering white. The sky was a sharp, aching blue. The Paha Sapa, the Black Hills, rose around them, draped in ermine, silent and majestic. The air was so clean it hurt to breathe. He stood for a long time, just breathing, his back to her. He was reclaiming himself. When he turned, his face was set. "We eat, then we ride." They left the cave. The look they shared was no longer the simple stare of captive and captor. It was heavy with the memory of the night, the weight of the letter, the knowledge of the kill. They were bound by secrets and survival. They found the horses, miserable but alive, huddled in the back of the cave. Tashunka checked his own horse, then hers. He adjusted her saddle. Ellie, without thinking, went to mount as she always had. Side saddle, her leg hooked over the horn. Tashunka stopped her, his hand on her arm. He looked at her dress, torn and frozen, then at the saddle. "No," he said. He took his knife and, in one clean motion, sliced her heavy skirt from hem to knee. Ellie gasped, but she did not protest. "You will ride like a person," he said. He motioned for her to swing her leg over the saddle. She hesitated. It was unladylike. It was scandalous. It was also, she realized, practical. She hiked the ruined skirt up, put her boot in the stirrup, and threw her leg over the horse. The feeling was strange, powerful, and frighteningly free. She was astride the animal, balanced, connected to it in a way she had never been. He nodded once, a curt gesture of approval, and mounted his own horse. They rode deeper into the hills. The snow was deep, but Tashunka found the ridges where the wind had swept the ground clear. He taught her, again with few words. He pointed to the way a deer's track was different in deep snow. He showed her which bushes held berries, frozen but edible, and which would poison her. One afternoon, he unslung the bow he carried. It was a short, powerful bow of sinew and horn. "The rifle is loud," he said. "It calls the soldiers." He gave her the bow. "Shoot!" She tried. The arrow wobbled and fell 10 feet from the horse. He dismounted, his face tight with impatience. "No, your arm is wrong." He came up behind her. "Stand!" She slid off the horse. He put the bow in her hand, positioning her feet. "Here." He stood behind her, his good arm reaching around her to correct her grip. His body was pressed against her back. It was not the desperate, shivering contact of the cave. This was the deliberate, firm touch of a teacher. But it was still his body. She could feel his breath on her neck as he spoke. "Pull," he commanded. "Pull from your shoulder, not your arm." She could feel the heat of him, the solid wall of his chest. Her own breath caught. She pulled, her muscles trembling. "Now," he whispered, his voice in her ear. "Let it go." She released the string. The arrow flew, not straight, but true, and buried itself in a snowdrift 50 yards away. She let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. He stepped back, the contact broken. "Again," he said, his voice flat. She looked at the sky. It was vast, an unfiltered dome of blue. There were no fences, no church steeples, no chimney smoke. For the first of her life, she felt the sheer, terrifying size of the world. She was not in a parlor. She was outside, under the unfenced sky, learning to shoot a savage's bow, and she had never felt so alive. That night, the anger in him finally broke into words. They sat by a small, smokeless fire. The stars so close they looked like pinpricks in a black buffalo robe. "My mother," he said, his voice low, staring into the flames. "She died in the fort, Fort Laramie. She was not sick. They gave her medicine for a cough." He looked at Ellie, his eyes black holes of memory. "She did not cough blood. She coughed her lungs. The butcher." He spat the word. He wrote their names in a book, like he was counting deer hides. Ellie flinched. Progress demands such sacrifices. "This land," Tashunka continued, his hand gesturing to the dark, silent hills around them, "is Wakan. It is sacred. It is the heart of the world. It is where Wakantanka, the great mystery, spoke to our grandfathers. The white man comes. He cuts the trees. He scares the buffalo. He builds his iron road, and he brings his pox." He closed his eyes. "I made an oath on my mother's grave. I will not let them have the Pahasapa. I will die first." Ellie looked at him, at the terrible, righteous grief on his face. She had to make him understand. "My world is also a lie. Tashunka," she said, her voice quiet but fierce. He looked at her, skeptical. "You call my husband a medicine man. But he was not the only one. I lived in a city called Boston. It is full of churches, great stone caves where men speak to their God. They preach charity, and they let children starve in the snow outside their doors." She leaned forward, her own anger rising. "I worked in his hospital, the army hospital. I saw men die, not from bullets, but from the doctor's pride. They cut off legs that could be saved. They bled men who were already weak. They called it science. They called it progress." She looked at her own hands. "They have laws. So many laws. Laws to protect a man's horse, his house, his money. They have no laws to protect a man's soul." "I saw what they did. I saw the hypocrisy, the lies." She met his gaze. "You ran from the fort to save your people. I ran from my city to save myself. I was running from the same lies you are." He stared at her for a long, long time. The fire crackled between them. He did not see a Wasiku woman. He saw something else, someone who had also seen the rot beneath the paint. He gave a single, slow nod. He did not trust her, not fully, but he understood her. And in that, a new, unspoken bond was forged, stronger than the fear, stronger than the hatred. They moved on, climbing higher. They were a team now, a silent, efficient pair. He hunted. She dressed the wounds in the game. He watched the ridges. She watched his back. On the 5th day after the storm, they reached the high spine of the hills. The prairie spread out below them to the east. A vast, brown ocean. Tashunka stopped, his body going rigid. He motioned for her to be still. He dismounted, crawling on his belly to the edge of the granite ridge. He lay there, unmoving, for a full minute. Ellie's heart began to hammer. She slipped off her horse, her own rifle in her hand. He crawled back, his face grim. "Soldiers," he whispered. "Where?" "Below. A day's ride, following our trail." He had seen the broken branch, the trail through the deep snow. "How many?" 10, maybe 12. He looked at her, his eyes flat and hard. "And the one who leads them, the one with the pale eyes." Ellie's stomach dropped. "Cole!" "He did not give up," Tashunka said. "He is like the wolf. He has the taste of blood." Ellie looked back the way they had come. The escape was over. The hunt had begun. Nathan Cole had followed them into the sacred heart of the Pahasapa. The sight of the soldiers below was a judgment. Nathan Cole was not just following them. He was hunting them. And the snow had been his map. "We cannot outrun them," Ellie said, her voice flat, the cold biting into her words. "The horses are tired." "We do not run from," Tashunka said. He stood, his gaze fixed on the hidden pass above them. We run to... My people are close. He kicked his horse, a sharp, urgent command. He did not spare the animal. He did not spare himself or her. For the next 2 hours, they pushed through the snow-choked high country, a desperate, lung-bursting scramble. Tashunka was no longer a guide. He was a leader, pulling her into the one place on earth he had sworn to protect from her kind. He stopped at a sheer rock face that looked like a dead end, a wall of gray, snow-dusted granite. He dismounted, put his fingers to his lips, and made the sharp, 3-note cry of a red-tailed hawk. The sound echoed once, sharp and clear in the thin air. A minute passed. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs, the sound loud in the vast silence. An answer came, the same cry from the rocks above them. A moment later, 4 men appeared. They were not ghosts, but they seemed to have materialized from the rock itself. They were Lakota, their faces hard and grim, their bows drawn. They saw Tashunka. Their faces, chiseled by hunger and cold, broke open with a disbelief so profound it was almost painful. One of them, a tall warrior with a scar across his jaw, stepped forward, his bow lowering. "Tashunka," he whispered, as if speaking to a spirit. "They said you were dead. They said the soldiers." "I am here, Kangi," Tashunka said, his voice rough. He gripped the other man's arm. "I am home." The joy of his return lasted only a second. The 4 warriors' eyes shifted to Ellie. She sat on her mare, her pale face, her white woman's clothes, a desecration in this sacred place. The bows came up again, arrows pointing at her heart. "What is this?" Kangi demanded, his voice turning to a growl. "You bring a Wasiku here to our hidden place." "She is with me," Tashunka said, moving to stand beside her horse. "She is a spy," another warrior spat. "She led the soldiers to you." "The soldiers are behind us," Tashunka said, his voice sharp. "They hunt us. This woman, she saved my life." The warriors stared. The confession hung in the air, that their strongest, proudest warrior had needed saving, and by this woman. It was a thing they could not understand. "She saved me from the soldiers," Tashunka said, the words costing him. "And she killed one of the Comanche who attacked us." This gave them pause. Kangi looked at Ellie, his eyes narrowing. He saw the Winchester in her saddle scabbard. He saw her hands, raw and chapped, clutching the reins. She did not look like a spy. She looked like a ghost. "Eagle's cry will decide." Kangi said, "Bring them." They were led through a narrow crack in the rock, a passage so tight they had to dismount and lead the horses. It opened into a deep, hidden bowl, a valley protected on all sides by high granite walls. It was a perfect hiding place. Perhaps 20 lodges stood scattered among the tall, snow-dusted pines. This was not the mighty Lakota nation she had read about. This was a remnant, a small, starving band of survivors. Old men, women, and children stared as they entered, their faces thin, their eyes huge and dark. An old man emerged from the largest lodge. His hair was white, braided with otter fur, his face a beautiful, intricate map of 100 winters. He walked with a staff, but his back was straight. This was Eagle's cry. He saw Tashunka. The staff dropped from his hand. He stopped, his body trembling. "My son," he breathed, "my son, who was lost." Tashunka went to him, and the old man embraced him, his hands clutching Tashunka's shoulders, his face buried in his tunic. "They said you were gone." He wept. "The spirits have returned you." The embrace was long and fierce, a father reclaiming his child. Then Eagle's cry pulled back. He looked past Tashunka and saw Ellie. His face changed. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, hard authority. "You have brought a stranger," he said. "She is the one I spoke of." Tashunka said, "She is Eleanor. She is the healer. She is white, the old man stated, as if naming a disease. She is not our enemy. A woman's voice, sharp and cold as ice, cut through the air. She is white. Her skin is her crime. Why is she here? Tashunka. A young woman pushed through the crowd. She was tall and slender, with a fierce, proud beauty. Her black hair in 2 long braids. She looked at Tashunka with a burning intensity, a look of possession, of years of waiting. Then her gaze fell on Ellie. The look turned to a pure, undiluted hatred that was so strong it was almost a physical blow. "This is Nita," Tashunka said, his voice low. "She was, He paused. "She is the daughter of a great warrior." "I was his betrothed," Nita said. Her eyes locked on Ellie. "Before the soldiers took him, and he returns, not with honor, but with her. A Wasi-ku pet." "Nita, be silent," Eagle's Cry commanded, though his eyes held the same suspicion. "She is a spy," Nita said, ignoring the old man, her voice rising. "She led the soldiers who hunt us. Look, they are already in the hills. He has brought them to our last hiding place." The crowd murmured, their fear turning to anger. They surged forward, their faces twisted with hate. "Kill her," one man yelled. "Kill the spy." Tashunka drew his knife. He stood in front of Ellie, his back to her, facing his own people. "No," he said, his voice a low roar. "You will not harm her. She is under my protection." "Your protection," Nita laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Have you forgotten your mother? Have you forgotten the pox blankets, or has this white woman made you forget you are Lakota?" The words struck Tashunka harder than a bullet. He flinched, his face torn. He was trapped between his oath to his people, the memory of his mother, and the undeniable, baffling truth of the woman behind him. He looked at Ellie, his eyes filled with a sudden, terrible doubt. "Enough," Eagle's Cry shouted. He struck the frozen ground with his staff. "We are Lakota. We are not murderers of helpless women. She will be watched." "Tashunka, you will come to the council lodge. You will tell us of the soldiers. You have brought this danger, and you must tell us how to escape it." He turned and walked back to his lodge. The crowd slowly dispersed, but their eyes, full of hatred and fear, never left Ellie. She was given a small, empty teepee at the very edge of the camp, far from the central fire. 2 warriors, including Kangi, were posted outside. She was a prisoner once more. Inside the council lodge, the air was thick with smoke and fear. Tashunka told them everything. He told them of Cole, of his relentless pursuit. "He is not like the other soldiers," Tashunka said. "He does not fight for duty. He fights with hate. He hunts me, and he hunts the woman. He will not stop until he finds us." "Then we must give her to him," a warrior said. "A trade, her life for ours." "No," Tashunka said, his voice flat. "He will take her, and then he will kill us all. He wants the hawk, and he wants the woman who freed him. He will not leave until he has both." "You have brought this doom upon us." "Tashunka," Nita said, standing in the lodge, her presence an accusation. "Your weakness for this white woman has doomed us." Tashunka was torn. He looked at the faces of his people, thin with hunger, their eyes haunted. He looked at Eagle's Cry, who was old and tired. His duty was here. He had sworn to lead these people, to protect them. But the thought of handing Ellie over to Nathan Cole, to the man who would hang her, it made him physically sick. He remembered her in the snow, her plea for warmth. He remembered her, raising the rifle to save him. "We must run." Eagle's Cry said, "We will pack. We will go north, into the deep mountains, where the snow will hide our tracks." "He will follow," Tashunka insisted. "Then he will follow." The old man said, "But we will not die here." While the men argued, Ellie sat alone in the cold teepee. She could hear the shouts from the council. She knew they were deciding her fate. A sound made her turn. A child, a small boy of perhaps 3 or 4, had slipped past the guards and was peering into her lodge, his dark eyes wide with curiosity. He was thin, his tunic too large for him, and he was coughing, a deep, wet, racking cough that shook his small body. Ellie's heart ached. She held out her hand. "Hello," she said softly. The boy just stared, then coughed again. A terrible, tearing sound. A moment later, Nita was there. She snatched the boy up, pulling him away from Ellie as if she were poison. "Do not go near her," she hissed at the child. She glared at Ellie. "Witch, you have cursed him." She stormed away, her son coughing in her arms. The cough echoed through the camp. It was not just Nita's son. Ellie had been hearing it all day. She recognized it. It was the same lung fever that had plagued the barracks at Fort Rawlins, a sickness that fed on the cold and the hunger. She looked at her medical bag. It was almost empty. A few bandages, a small bottle of laudanum, and a packet of quinine powder. She waited. She sat in her teepee for a day. The camp was in a quiet panic. People packing bundles, preparing to run, and all through the camp, the coughing grew worse. 3, 4, 5 children were sick. The Lakota medicine man was working. Ellie could hear his chants, the rattle, the steam from his lodge, but the coughing did not stop. On the second night, Nita came to her teepee. She did not enter. She stood in the flap, her face a mask of iron pride, but her eyes were wild with terror. "My son," she said, her voice a low, strangled rasp. He burns. He cannot breathe. The spirits do not answer." Ellie stood up. "Let me see him." "No," Nita recoiled. "You are Wasiku." "I am a healer," Ellie said, her voice hard, not with anger, but with the old authority she had not used in months. "Your medicine man's chants are not working. Your son is dying. Do you want your pride, or do you want your son?" Nita stared at her, her body shaking. The war in her was terrible. Finally, she broke. A low sob escaped her. "Help me," she whispered. Ellie grabbed her bag. The guards tried to stop her. "Let her pass," Nita commanded. The village watched as the white woman was brought into Nita's lodge. Tashunka, emerging from the council, saw her, and his heart stopped. Nita's son, Little Owl, was dying. His small body was arched in pain, his skin burning hot, his breath coming in shallow, ragged wheezes. Ellie did not hesitate. "Boil water, now," she commanded Nita. "Bring me clean cloths." She worked. She mixed the precious quinine with water, forcing the bitter draft down the boy's throat. She boiled willow bark, a remedy Tashunka had shown her, to fight the fever. She made a hot poultice of herbs and pine resin from her bag and laid it on his small, congested chest. She did not sleep. For 2 nights and a day, she sat in that smoky lodge, bathing the boy, forcing water and broth between his blue lips, listening to every rattling breath. Nita sat across from her, watching, her knife in her hand. She watched Ellie's hands, gentle and firm. She watched her eyes, full of a fierce, desperate concentration. She saw no magic. She saw no witchcraft. She saw a woman fighting, just as she was, for the life of her son. Tashunka stood outside the lodge, a silent, tormented guardian. He could hear Ellie's voice, low and murmuring, not in English, but in a soft, wordless, comforting sound as she bathed the boy. He was trapped, his love and his duty warring over the small, dying flame of a child's life. On the 3rd morning, Ellie was slumped against the lodge pole, exhausted, her face gray with fatigue. Little Owl was sleeping. His fever had broken. His breathing was still rough, but it was deep and even. He was no longer wheezing. He was alive. Nita crept forward. She touched her son's forehead. It was cool. She touched his chest, feeling the steady, slow rise and fall. She looked at Ellie. The hatred in her eyes was gone, washed away by 2 nights of shared terror. It was replaced by a profound, shaking gratitude, an emotion so new and unwelcome it choked her. She said nothing. She did not have the words. She reached out and, for a single second, laid her hand on Ellie's arm. It was a truce. It was a thank you. It was an acknowledgement. Ellie looked up, her eyes weary, and nodded. Nita took her son, wrapped him in a fresh robe, and held him, weeping silent, grateful tears. The camp was saved. The news spread like a spring wind. The healer, the Wasiku woman, was not a witch. She was a healer. Other mothers brought their children. Ellie, her strength renewed, worked on, treating 2 other children, saving them. The suspicion in the camp turned to a quiet, reserved awe. They were not ready to trust her, but they no longer wanted her dead. Tashunka watched, his heart swelling with a strange, fierce pride he could not name. The trust came too late, on the 4th morning, as Ellie stepped from Nita's lodge into the cold, bright sunlight. A cry went up from the warrior at the lookout. "Soldiers, they are coming, they are in the pass." The camp exploded. Panic, shrieks, the warriors running for their horses. Nathan Cole had not waited. He had not rested. He had come. Gunshots echoed, the sharp cracks of army carbines, magnified by the granite walls. It was not a parley. It was not an arrest. It was an attack. "Fire the lodges!" Cole's voice, clear and cold, echoed down the valley. "Leave none alive." Soldiers on horseback charged into the small, hidden village, firing into the teepees. Women screamed, grabbing their children. Tashunka was instantly at Ellie's side. "Run!" he roared, shoving her toward the high rocks at the back of the valley. "Go with Nita Hyde." "Tashunka, go, I will hold them." He raised his rifle. Joining the small, desperate band of warriors, Kangi and 10 others who were forming a line to protect their families. Ellie ran. She grabbed the hand of an old woman, pulling her along. Nita was just ahead, her son strapped to her back. They scrambled up the icy rocks, trying to reach the cover of the high pines. Nathan Cole sat on his horse, a large black gelding, at the mouth of the valley, directing the slaughter. He watched the flames lick at the drying hides of the lodges. This was his justice. Then, through the smoke, he saw her. He saw the pale face, the dirty blonde hair. He saw the white woman, Eleanor Whitlock, running, not from the Lakota, but with them, running with the women as one of them. His face, which had been cold, twisted into a mask of pure, righteous fury. This was the ultimate betrayal. "Her!" he screamed, pointing. "The woman, take her, I want her alive." 2 soldiers heard, wheeling their horses. They galloped through the chaos, ignoring the fleeing Lakota, their eyes fixed on Ellie. She saw them coming. She tried to climb faster, but the old woman fell, and Ellie would not leave her. A soldier on a bay horse reached her. He leaned down, his face split in a grin. He grabbed the front of her cloak, a fistful of cloth, and hauled her off her feet, dragging her onto the saddle in front of him. "Got her, Lieutenant!" he yelled. "Tashunka!" Ellie screamed, her voice tearing, a sound of pure terror. Tashunka heard her cry over the gunfire. His head snapped around. He saw her, struggling in the soldier's grasp. He saw Nathan Cole, riding toward her, a smile of cold, thin triumph on his face. Tashunka forgot his people. He forgot the warriors dying beside him. He forgot the bullets. His world narrowed to that single, terrible image, Cole reaching for Ellie. He roared, a sound of pure, animal rage, and he ran, breaking from the cover of the rocks, charging into the open, his rifle raised. "Ellie!" He was trying to get a clear shot at the soldier who held her, but she was struggling in the way. Cole saw him coming. He stopped his horse. He looked at the Lakota warrior, charging him, his face a mask of primal fury. Cole smiled. He raised his own carbine, took calm, deliberate aim, and fired. The sound of the shot was flat and final. Tushunka stopped, as if he had run into an invisible wall. He looked down. A dark, spreading stain was blooming on his chest, high up, on his right side, his good side. The force of the bullet spun him half around. His rifle fell from his suddenly numb fingers. "No!" Ellie shrieked, raking her nails down the soldier's face. Tushunka looked at her. He saw her face, twisted in a horror that was all for him. He saw Cole grab the reins of her horse, taking possession of her. He tried to take a step, to warn her, to fight. His legs buckled. The world, the smoke, the burning lodges, the sound of the screaming, the sight of Cole's triumphant face. It all began to spin, fading into a roaring, red-black void. He fell, face down, onto the cold, smoking earth of his sacred and violated home. The scream was ripped from Ellie's throat, a sound of pure, animal desolation. "No, Tushunka!" She did not feel the soldier's arm, a vice of greasy wool and sweat, crushing her against his saddle. She did not feel the heat of the burning lodges or the sting of the smoke. Her entire world had narrowed to the man, face down, unmoving, in the dirt and the smoke. The dark stain on his back was a new, terrible mouth that had swallowed her hope. "He is dead, ma'am." The soldier holding her grunted, his voice coarse with satisfaction. "And you are coming with us." She fought him, a wildcat, raking her nails at his face, kicking, biting. "Let me go. He has not let me go." The soldier cursed, striking her across the face, a hard, backhanded blow that snapped her head back, splitting her lip. The taste of her own blood, metallic and hot, shocked her into a stunned, weeping stillness. Lieutenant Nathan Cole trotted his horse through the chaos, his face serene, his pale eyes bright with the pleasure of a successful hunt. He stopped, looking down at Tushunka's still form. "A fitting end for a savage," Cole said, his voice calm, almost conversational. He looked up at the rocks, where the remaining Lakota warriors, Kangi among them, were still firing, a desperate, hopeless defense. "You in the rocks!" Cole shouted, his voice carrying over the gunfire. "Eagle's cry, Kangi, your warrior is dead, the one you followed." He rode into the center of the clearing, pulling the horse that carried Ellie alongside him. The soldier held her fast. "I have the white woman, your new pet. Lay down your arms and surrender, or I will have my man kill her right here." Kangi's rifle shot was the answer. The bullet kicked up dirt 10 feet from Cole's horse. Cole laughed, a thin, cold sound. "Fools, you will all die to protect this traitor," he motioned to the soldier. "Put your pistol to her head, on my command." The soldier unholstered his revolver, pressing the cold, round mouth of the barrel against Ellie's temple. She squeezed her eyes shut, her body rigid. From the rocks, Nita watched, her son clutched to her chest. She saw the white woman, the healer, with a gun to her head. She saw the warriors hesitate. Ellie opened her eyes. She saw Nita. She saw the children, cowering behind the rocks. She saw the hopeless, terrible choice in Kangi's eyes. They would die for her. After she had saved them, they would die for her. The thought was unbearable. She found her voice, a raw, desperate shriek that cut through the valley. "No, do not listen to him. Let them go." She twisted, staring at Nathan Cole, her eyes blazing with a suicidal, protective fury. "It is me you want. Only me. Let them go." Cole smiled. "They will not, Mrs. Whitlock. They are savages. They—" "It was me!" she screamed, the confession tearing from her. I am the one you want. I am the one who freed him. I am the one who killed your soldiers at the creek. I shot the Comanche. I killed them all. It was me." The world stopped. The firing from the rocks ceased. Kangi, Nita, Eagle's Cry. They all stared, frozen. The soldiers looked at her, their faces slack with shock. Nathan Cole's smile vanished. His face went white, then mottled with a dark, furious red. She had not only betrayed her people, she was proud of it. She had confessed in front of his men, in front of the savages. She had given her loyalty to them. "You, whore," he whispered, the word thick with venom. He raised his gauntleted hand and struck her again. A blow of pure, personal hatred. "Silence her. If they fire one more shot, kill her." The man on the ground was not dead. Tashunka was in a world of red pain. The bullet had felt like a hot iron poker, punching through his chest, stealing his breath, his strength, his sight. He had fallen into a black, roaring void. But the cold earth and the sound of her scream had pulled him back. He was on his face, tasting the blood and the dirt. He could not move his right arm. It was a dead, useless thing. His chest was afire. He heard Cole's voice. He heard the threat. Then he heard her voice. He heard her confession. "I am the one who freed him. I killed them all. It was me." She was lying. She was lying to save his people. She was taking his kills, his actions, onto herself, a burden that would see her hanged. She was offering her life for his. The knowledge was a fire stronger than the bullet. It burned away the darkness. It burned away the pain. He heard the sound of the blow. He heard her cry of pain. Rage. A rage so pure and so absolute that it had no sound. It was the rage of the Paha Sapa as the trees burned. It was the rage of his mother, dying of the pox. It was the rage of a man seeing the one thing he protected, struck down. He opened his eyes. The world was a blur of smoke and red. He had his knife in the sheath on his left side. His left arm, his wounded arm, was weak, but it worked. He pushed himself up. One of the soldiers, his back to Tashunka, saw the movement. "Lieutenant, he is alive!" Cole spun, his face a mask of disbelief. Tashunka was on his feet. He was not a man. He was a spirit of vengeance, risen from the dirt, his face smeared with blood and mud, his chest a gaping, pumping ruin. His right arm hung useless, but his left hand held his long, glittering knife. "Ellie!" he roared. The soldier holding Ellie, shocked by the resurrection, loosened his grip for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. She slammed her head back into his face, feeling his nose break. He yelled, his hands flying to his face. Ellie threw herself from the horse, rolling, scrambling on the ground. Tashunka was moving. He ignored Cole. He ignored the other soldiers. He ran at the man Ellie had just left, the man who was now fumbling for his pistol. Tashunka was faster. With his one good arm, he plunged his knife into the soldier's side, under the ribs, a single, deep, powerful thrust. The man sighed, his pistol clattering to the ground, and slid from his horse. Ellie grabbed the hot, heavy revolver from the dirt. You should have stayed dead, savage!" Cole screamed, his voice breaking with fury. He was not a soldier now. He was a jealous man. He drew his saber, the long, curved blade ringing in the fiery air. He spurred his horse, not at Tashunka, but at Ellie. Tashunka saw it. He launched himself, intercepting the horse, grabbing the bridle with his left hand. The horse reared, screaming, trying to pull away. Tashunka held on, his feet dragging, his body a dead weight, his knife useless as he held the animal. Cole swore, fighting his horse, and swung his saber, a whistling, vicious arc aimed at Tashunka's head. Tashunka let go, falling back, the blade slicing the air where his neck had been. Cole reined his horse in, dismounting in a single Batian fluid motion. "This ends," he snarled. "Here, You and me." He advanced on Tashunka. Tashunka, his knife in his left hand, his right arm dangling, his chest leaking blood, stood his ground. He was weak, he was dying, but he was here. It was not a fair fight. Cole was a trained swordsman, untouched. Tashunka was grievously wounded, his strong arm useless. Cole lunged. Tashunka, expecting a thrust, was slow to parry with his left hand. The saber's point ripped across his good shoulder, the one he had used to hold the bow. The knife fell from his numb fingers. He was disarmed. He was helpless. "Tashunka!" Ellie screamed. She raised the revolver, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Cole laughed, seeing the fallen knife. He did not even look at Ellie. He raised his saber, both hands on the hilt, for a final, downward execution stroke. "I told you I would hunt you to hell," he breathed, his face alight with triumph. "Nathan!" Ellie screamed. He ignored her. He was lost in the kill. Ellie stopped shaking. A sudden, terrible calm descended on her. The same cold calm she'd felt when she stitched Tashunka's first wound. The same calm she'd felt when she shot the Comanche. She saw the blade rise. She saw Tashunka, swaying, defenseless, but his eyes were on her. She held the revolver with both hands. She aimed at the center of Nathan Cole's blue uniform. She pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening, flat and final in the burning valley. Nathan Cole stopped. His arms, raised high, went slack. The saber fell, ringing on the rocks. He stood for a second, a look of profound, almost childlike surprise on his face. He turned, his body moving in a slow, clumsy circle. He looked at Ellie. "Eleanor," he whispered. It was not an accusation. It was a question. He crumpled, his knees folding, and fell forward. He landed at Tashunka's feet, dead. Silence. The roar of the fire, the crackle of burning pine, the distant, terrified shouts of the soldiers. But the fight, the duel, was over. Tashunka stared at Cole's body. He looked at Ellie, who was standing, the pistol smoking in her hands, tears streaming down her face, making clean tracks through the soot and blood. She had done it again. She had killed for him. She had killed her own people, for him. The remaining soldiers, seeing their lieutenant fall, killed by the white woman, panicked. Their attack broke. They were just men, far from home, their leader dead. They began to fall back, firing wildly, pulling out of the valley. Kangi and the remaining Lakota warriors did not pursue. They gave a single, ragged cheer. Ellie ran to Tashunka. "You are alive," she whispered, her hands hovering over his ruined chest, afraid to touch him. "You are alive." He was swaying. His eyes, which had burned with rage, were now clouded with pain and a shocking, overwhelming exhaustion. He looked at her. "Ellie." He breathed her name, a prayer. He collapsed. She caught him, his dead weight falling against her, his blood instantly soaking the front of her dress. "No," she sobbed. "No, you cannot. I did not kill him for you to die." Tashunka Nita was there, her son on her back. She saw the wound, the blood, the pale, unconscious face. The debt she owed was being called in. "Help me," Ellie cried, pulling at his arm. Together, the two women, the betrothed and the... whatever Ellie was, they lifted him. They dragged him to the nearest horse, the one the dead soldier had ridden. With a strength born of pure, desperate adrenaline, they hauled his limp body onto the saddle. The valley was an inferno. The fire had leaped from the lodges to the trees. The high granite walls were channeling the heat, turning the entire valley into a furnace. The smoke was a thick, black, choking shroud. "This way!" Kangi yelled, motioned to the women and children. "To the high pass! The fire is behind us!" Ellie mounted her mare, pulling Tashunka's horse by the lead rope. He was slumped forward. a dead man on a living horse. "Hold on," she whispered, knowing he could not hear her. "Hold on for me." They rode, a small, ragged band of survivors, up the steep goat track at the back of the valley, the flames licking at their horses' hooves. They rode through a curtain of fire, the heat scorching their faces, the smoke blinding them. They reached the high ridge, the spine of the hills, and stopped, looking back. Their home, their last sanctuary, was gone. It was a bowl of fire, a roaring, cleansing blaze, consuming the dead, the lodges, the soldiers, and the body of Nathan Cole. The past was being burned away, reduced to ash. As they watched, the sky, which had been a clear, cold blue, turned a bruised, heavy gray. A low rumble of thunder sounded, impossible in the cold. And then the rain came. Not a gentle rain, but a hard, driving, ice-cold deluge. It hissed into the inferno below, and a vast column of steam and ash rose to meet the clouds. Ellie sat her horse, the cold rain plastering her hair to her face, washing the blood and soot from her skin. She held the reins of Tashunka's horse. He was still slumped over, his breathing a shallow, terrible rasp. She looked at the burning, steaming, dying pyre below. It was an ending. It was a baptism. The ash of their past was being washed away by the rain of a new, uncertain and terrible future. The rain was a cold, cruel blessing. It fell in icy sheets, extinguishing the flames of the burning valley, turning the ashes of the Lakota camp into a black, steaming slurry. It washed the blood and soot from their faces, but it chilled them to the bone. A new, insidious enemy. Ellie rode beside Tashunka. He was a dead weight on his horse, slumped over the animal's neck, tied to the saddle with a length of rope Kangi had given her. His blood, thinned by the rain, dripped in a pale, pinkish stream, pattering on the rocks. The small band of survivors, less than 20, were ghosts moving through a gray, weeping world. Eagle's cry led them, his face a mask of grief, but his back was straight. Nita was close behind him, her son, Little Owl, bundled deep in her robes, his cough the only sound besides the hoofbeats and the hissing rain. Ellie had eyes only for Tashunka. The bullet had entered his right chest, high up, near the collarbone. She did not know what it had hit. It had exited his back, a ragged, larger hole that was bleeding sluggishly. He was shot through. Added to that was the new saber cut on his left shoulder and his old, half-healed bullet wound. He was a map of pain, and he was dying. She had no medicine. Her bag was gone. Lost in the fire, she had only her hands and her terror. They rode for hours, putting as much distance as they could between themselves and the smoking valley. They left the high country, descending onto the vast, open rolling plains. The land was a sea of brown, winter-dead grass, beaten flat by the rain. It was a desert of its own kind, empty and shelterless. By nightfall, the rain had slowed to a miserable drizzle. They had to stop. The horses were exhausted, and Tashunka was dying. They found a shallow buffalo wallow, a dip in the prairie that offered scant protection from the wind. Kangi and the other warrior built a small, smoky fire with wet buffalo chips. Ellie and Nita, in a silent, grim partnership, slid Tashunka from his horse. He groaned, a low, animal sound that tore at Ellie's heart. They laid him near the fire, on the only dry buffalo robe they had. He was burning with fever, his skin hot and dry despite the rain. His breathing was a shallow, rattling gasp. "He is with the spirits," Eagle's cry said, his voice heavy. He stood over his son, his face etched with a terrible finality. He began the low, mournful, rising and falling cadence of the death chant. "No!" Ellie's voice was a raw cry. She scrambled to her knees, pushing the old man's hand away from his son's forehead. "He is not. Do not sing that. He can hear you." Eagle's cry looked at her, his eyes full of a dark, weary pity. "He is Lakota. His spirit must be sung home. Let him go, Wasiku." "I will not," she said, her voice shaking with a fury born of pure, desperate love. She ripped a clean strip of linen from her own petticoat, the last civilized thing she owned. She soaked it in the cold, gritty water from her canteen and began to bathe his face. "Tashunka," she whispered, her voice fierce, her lips close to his ear. "Do not listen. You stay with me. Do you hear me? You are not allowed to go." Nita watched her, her dark eyes unreadable in the firelight. She said nothing, but she went and boiled water in a small pot, adding bitter herbs she had gathered. She brought the steaming cup to Ellie. "This is for the fever," she said. Ellie looked at her, a silent, grateful acknowledgement passing between them. Together, they forced the hot, bitter liquid between his cracked lips. He did not wake. He slipped deeper into the darkness. For 2 days, they moved, a slow, agonizing crawl. For 2 days, Ellie did not sleep. She rode beside him, holding him upright in his saddle. When they stopped, she was the one who cleaned his wounds with the last of the boiled water. She had nothing to stitch with. She had nothing to fight the infection that was clearly raging. She was a healer with no tools, a woman watching the man she loved die. On the 3rd night, he woke. The moon was a high, cold sliver. The wind was a lonely, hollow sound across the plains. Ellie sat beside him, her head on her knees, so tired she could no longer weep. She felt his hand, his left hand, the weak one, touch her hair. Her head snapped up. His eyes were open. They were clear, not clouded with fever, but filled with a profound, terrible, and peaceful understanding. He knew. "Ellie," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp, the sound of leaves skittering over stone. "I am here," she choked, grabbing his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "I am here." "You fight hard," he breathed. A small, faint smile touched his lips. "Like a badger woman. Tashunka, do not talk. Save your strength." "No, listen." He squeezed her hand. A flicker of his old strength. He was gathering the last of his life, to give her this final command. "If I die, when I die." "No. Listen." His voice was firm. "You must burn me. The Wasiku, they put their dead in the ground, in boxes. The soul cannot get free. I will not be in a box." He coughed, a terrible, wet sound. He tasted blood. "Burn me," he commanded, his eyes holding hers. "Burn my body. Let the wind take the ashes. Let my soul ride the clouds to the long grass. Promise me." He was giving her the ultimate trust. He was asking her, the white woman, to be the guardian of his Lakota soul. The request shattered her, the last of her control. The wall she had built against her grief crumbled. "No!" she wailed, the sound ripping from her, a cry of rebellion against God, against the spirits, against death itself. She clutched his hand, her body shaking with sobs. "No, I will not. I did not come all this way. I did not kill for you. I did not run with you. I did not come here to lose anyone else. I will not be a widow again. Do you hear me? I will not." She was screaming it at him, at the uncaring sky. She was no longer a healer. She was a woman, raw and broken, refusing to let go. He stared at her, his eyes wide. He saw not just her grief for him. He saw her past. He saw the shadow of the other man, the doctor, the husband she had lost. He saw that she was fighting for him, but also for herself, for the right to not be left alone again. He closed his eyes, his strength gone. "Ellie," he whispered, and the darkness took him again. Eagle's cry had heard. He had seen. He came to her and knelt beside his son. He placed his hand on Tashunka's chest. The breathing was almost gone. The old man looked at Ellie. Her face was a mask of tears and desperate, defiant fury. He saw her. He truly saw her. Not as Wasiku, but as a woman who had given his son her own soul. He stood up. "Kangi," he called. "We do not rest here. We ride." "He cannot ride, old man," Kangi said, his voice rough. "He is dead." "He is not," Eagle's Cry said, his voice a sudden, iron command. "We ride. We go to the Memeni Wakan, the place where the water breathes." Kangi stared. "It is forbidden. It is sacred." "It is our only place." The old man said. He looked at Ellie. "Heal your son, Nita," he said, gesturing to Little Owl. "This woman will heal mine." They rode. It was a journey of pure, blind faith. Ellie was numb. She did not know what this place was, but it was a word. It was a direction. It was not nothing. They left the plains, climbing back into a different part of the hills. A barren, rocky landscape that seemed dead. They rode for another day, Ellie holding Tashunka in his saddle, her own body screaming with fatigue. They came to it at sunset. It was a small, hidden valley, a tiny oasis. In the center was not a lake, but a small, round pool of water, perfectly clear, steam rising from its surface in the cold evening air. A sacred spring. "The spirits gave this water to our people," Eagle's Cry said, his voice hushed. "It is the breath of Unsimaka, our grandmother Earth. It can cleanse the soul." They laid Tashunka on a robe near the edge of the steaming pool. He was cold. His skin, which had been burning, was now clammy and cool. Death was coming. Eagle's Cry and Nita began to chant. This time it was not a death song. It was a plea, a song to the spirits of the place. Ellie watched them. She looked at the water. She had no place here. She was the outsider, the butcher's wife, the killer of Nathan Cole. She looked at Tashunka, his face peaceful, his breath a faint, irregular whisper. "No," she said, her voice quiet. She stood up. She walked to the edge of the pool. She knelt, just as she had knelt in her church in Boston. But this was not a cold, stone floor. It was warm, damp earth. She looked at her hands, stained with his blood, with Cole's gunpowder. She plunged them into the hot, sulphurous water. It stung, but it was a clean, pure pain. She did not know their songs. She did not know their God. So she spoke. She spoke to the steam, to the water, to the darkening sky. "I do not know who is here," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I am Eleanor Whitlock. I was a healer. I am a killer. I am a widow." She looked at Eagle's Cry. "Your spirits, they have no reason to listen to me. My people have lied. My husband, he was the pox." The confession was a rock in her throat. Eagle's Cry's chanting faltered. He stared at her. "But this man," Ellie continued, turning back to the water, her voice breaking. "This man, your son, he is not my people, and I am not his, but he is my heart." She wept, the tears dropping into the sacred water. "I have no right to ask. I have no gifts. I have only me. I have his blood on my hands, and he has mine. I have killed for him. I have died for him. If you are here, Wakantanka, great mystery, if you are here, do not take him. He is a good man. He is a warrior. He is mine." She took her hands from the water, cupping the hot, living liquid. She went to Tashunka. She did not just bathe his wounds. She let the hot, sacred water drip from her fingers onto his lips. She washed his face. She whispered to him, her prayer merging with the Lakota chants. She was mixing her faith, her desperate scientific need to do something, with their ancient earthbound belief. The night grew deep and cold. The band slept, exhausted, huddled in their robes. But Ellie did not sleep. She lay down on the hard ground beside him. He was so cold. She pulled the robe over both of them, just as he had done for her in the blizzard. She lay against his unmoving form. She could feel no breath. "No," she whispered. This was not the intimacy of survival. This was a ritual of love, a last, desperate, wordless plea. She pressed her living body against his dying one. She laid her hand flat over his heart, willing her own pulse into him. She put her face close to his, her lips hovering over his, and she breathed. She breathed her own warm, living breath into his mouth. It was not a kiss, it was a transfusion. She was giving him her air, her life, her soul. "Come back," she whispered, her breath mingling with his. "Come back. Do not leave me here. Do not make me run alone." She lay like that for hours, her breath into his, her heart against his, a ritual of blood and wind, until, finally, her own exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a dead, dreamless sleep, her head on his uninjured shoulder, her hand still clasped over his heart. Dawn came, thin and cold, a line of pale gold in the east. The first ray of sun struck the spring, turning the rising steam into a column of gold. Ellie woke, not to a sound, but to a feeling, a movement. She looked up. Tashunka's eyes were open. He was not looking at the sky. He was not looking at his father. He was looking at her. He was breathing. The sound was rough, a painful rasp, but it was deep. It was his own. He was weak. He was a skeleton, but the fever was gone. His eyes were clear. He looked at her, lying on his chest, her face stained with tears and soot. He raised his left hand, slowly, an act of tremendous effort. He touched her face, his fingers tracing the tear track on her cheek. "Ellie," he whispered. His voice was a ruin, but it was his. She made a sound, a sob, a laugh, a gasp. "You are back," she breathed. "You are back." "I heard you," he whispered, his eyes closing. "You are loud, woman." He was alive. It was a miracle. The water, the prayer, her breath, something. He was alive. Later that day, he was propped against a rock, drinking broth Nita had made. The bullet had passed clean through, missing his lung, a miracle of its own. The sacred water, or just the heat, had cleaned the wound, stopping the infection. He was terribly weak, but he would live. The camp was, for the first time, not in fear, but in a state of quiet, hopeful awe. Ellie sat beside him, her hands busy cleaning her old revolver, her movements precise. He watched her for a long time. Finally, he reached out, his left hand, and covered hers, stopping her. She looked up. "No more running," he said, his voice quiet but strong. He looked at the healing wound on his right, the one Cole had given him, and at her, the one who had answered it. Ellie looked at his hand, covering hers. She thought of the soldiers, of the hunt, of the world that would be looking for them, the officer killer, the renegade's woman. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with his. "No more running," she said. "We faced them, together." They stayed at the sacred spring for 2 weeks. It was a time of strange, suspended peace. Tashunka's body, with a resilience that baffled Ellie's medical mind, began to mend. The bullet, having passed clean through, had missed his lung by a fraction of an inch. The hot, mineral water had kept the infection at bay. Anita's knowledge of herbs had fought the fever, but he was weak, a shadow of the man he had been. He could walk, he could ride, but he tired easily. And his right arm, the one shot by Cole, was still stiff and agonizingly slow to heal. Ellie watched him, her healer's eye critical. He was alive, but he was not well. He needed more than herbs and magic water. He needed quinine to build his strength. He needed carbolic salve to truly cleanse the wounds and prevent the deep, latent infection she still feared. He needed food, real food, not the stringy rabbit and lean deer Kangi managed to hunt. Word from the outside world came from Kangi, who had scouted the lowlands. The news was grim. The army was in an uproar. The story told by the 6 surviving soldiers from Cole's patrol had spread like a prairie fire. It was not a story of a battle. It was a story of a massacre, led by a renegade white woman. Lieutenant Nathan Cole, an officer and a gentleman, had been murdered in cold blood by his lover, the widow Eleanor Whitlock, who had turned savage and joined the Lakota. She was no longer a widow. She was a traitor. She was Cole's killer. There was a price on her head, $500, dead or alive. "We cannot stay here," Tashunka said, his voice quiet as he watched the steam rise from the spring. "My father is old, Nita and her son. They need safety. We must go north, join the Oglala bands in Montana." "You cannot make that journey," Ellie said, her voice flat. "Not like this. You will be dead in a week." "I will not die," he said, stubborn. "You will," she snapped, her fear making her angry. "You are strong, Tashunka, but your body is at its limit. You need medicine, real medicine." "There is no medicine here," he said. "No," she said, her mind made up. "But there is a 2-day ride south, a town." He looked at her, his eyes widening in disbelief. "What town?" "Rawlins. Fort Rawlins." He stood, his weakness forgotten. "No, absolutely not. It is a trap. It is the heart of the enemy. They will know you." "They will not," she said, her voice calm, her plan already formed. "They are looking for Cole's killer, a wild woman with savage paint, riding with a Lakota warrior. They are not looking for a grieving, quiet woman in a borrowed dress, coming to buy supplies for her homestead." "Ellie, it is madness. I forbid it." She looked at him, a small, hard smile touching her lips. "You forbid it. You are my husband, not my master. And you are weak because I have no quinine. I am a healer. I am going to heal you. Nita has a dress she took from a wagon. I will wear it. I will be back in 5 days." "I will go with you," he insisted, grabbing her arm. She laid her hand over his skin still hot. "You will not. They would see you a mile away. You will stay here. You will rest. You will trust me. You promised. No more running. This is not running. This is fighting. But my way." He stared at her, his heart at war with his mind. He hated it. It was a terrible risk. But he looked at his right arm, at the red, puckered wound, and he knew she was right. He was not strong enough, not yet. She left the next morning, before dawn. She was a different woman. Her hair, washed in the spring, was its natural pale blonde, tied back in a severe bun. She wore Nita's dress, a faded gray calico, plain and shapeless. She wore a deep bonnet that shadowed her face. She rode a horse Kangi had captured, a nondescript dun mare. She looked like any other settler's wife, worn down by the land. She rode for 2 days, her heart in her throat. She saw patrols, but she hid, her new hard-won skills serving her well. On the 3rd day, she saw Fort Rawlins. It had grown, a raw, ugly scar of fresh-cut pine and muddy streets, bustling with soldiers, trappers, and railroad men. She kept her head down, her face hidden by the bonnet, and rode down the main street. She tied her horse outside the General Mercantile, her hands shaking so badly she could barely tie the knot. She took a breath. "I am Mrs. Smith. My husband is sick. I need supplies." She walked inside. The store was dark, smelling of tobacco, pickle brine, and new denim. A few trappers loitered by the stove. The storekeeper, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, looked up. "Ma'am?" I need quinine, she said, her voice a low murmur, and carbolic salve, and laudanum. My husband, he has a lung fever. Got all that, the man said, turning to his shelves. Hard winter for the fever. How much quinine? All of it, she said. He paused, turning back. All of it, ma'am, that's... It was the trapper by the stove who spoke. He was one of the men who had come to the wagon, the bounty hunters, the one with the gap-toothed grin. He had not been with them when Cole found her. His chair scraped on the floor as he stood, his eyes narrowing, squinting at her. Well, now, he drawled. I know that voice. I'd know it anywhere. Ellie froze. He stepped closer, his face inches from hers. He smelled of whiskey and old sweat. Take off that bonnet, ma'am. I do not know you, sir, she whispered, backing away. Oh, I think you do. He ripped the bonnet from her head. Her blonde hair, bright in the dim store, was a beacon. By God, he breathed. It is her. It's the killer. It's Eleanor Whitlock. The store went silent. The storekeeper's jaw dropped. I got her, the trapper yelled, grabbing her arm in a painful grip. I got the $500 woman. To the colonel, she's mine. He dragged her out into the street. It's her. It's Cole's killer. We got her. The street, which had been bustling, stopped. Faces turned. The murmur became a growl. Within a minute, a crowd had formed. Soldiers ran from the saloon, their rifles in hand. They were surrounded. To the stockade, a soldier yelled. Stockade! Hell! A trapper shouted. Hang her, hang the traitor! The cry was picked up. Hang her! Hang the savage's woman! Hang her now! They dragged her, her feet barely touching the ground, toward the fort's main gates. The crowd was a monster, spitting at her, tearing at her dress. She was no longer a person. She was a symbol of all their fear and hatred. She was thrown, not into a cell, but into the center of the fort's parade ground. The trapper, his chest puffed with pride, stood over her. A man came out of the headquarters. He was tall, gray-haired, with a thick mustache and the eagles of a colonel on his shoulders. This was Colonel Harrison, the fort's commander, the man Nathan Cole had served. He looked at Ellie, his face a mask of cold, righteous fury. Eleanor Whitlock, he said, his voice booming over the quieted crowd. You were the widow of a fine man, a United States Army doctor, and you have brought shame, death, and betrayal to his name. He looked at the crowd, at the soldiers, at the civilians. This is not a matter for a distant court. This is army business. This is a field trial. She is a traitor, caught in an act of war against her own people. Hang her, the crowd roared. We will, the colonel said, his voice cold. But first, she will confess. He looked down at her. You will tell this fort, these good people, of your crimes. You will admit to your treason. You will admit to the murder of Lieutenant Nathan Cole. Ellie was helped to her feet by two soldiers. She was covered in mud, her dress torn, her lip bleeding again. She looked at the faces, twisted with hate. She looked at the colonel, his face a mask of certainty. She took a breath. Her voice, when she spoke, was not a whisper. It was clear, and it carried over the parade ground. My name is Eleanor Whitlock. I am a healer. She looked at the colonel. I'm not a traitor. I am free. You murdered a United States officer, he roared. I did, she said, her voice quiet but piercing. I killed him. He was a good soldier, but he was a bad man. He was a man filled with hate, and he was going to murder a man who was wounded and unarmed. The crowd gasped. This was not the confession they wanted. You killed him, the colonel said, his voice dangerously low. To save a savage, a red-skin murderer. I killed him to save a man, Ellie said, her voice rising, finding its strength. A man who had saved my life, more than once. A man who, while your soldiers were tormenting him, saved your lieutenant from a Comanche attack. You speak of savages. I have seen savagery. I saw it in my husband's letters, where he wrote of giving pox blankets to children. I saw it in Lieutenant Cole, who burned a village of women and old men, and I see it in your faces now. She stood tall, and she was no longer afraid. You ask me to confess? I will. I confess that I chose to save a good man over a hateful one. I confess that I found more honor in a Lakota village than I ever found in a Boston church. I did what I did. I killed to save a man, and in doing so, I saved my own soul. The silence that followed was absolute. A stunned, uncomprehending void. The colonel's face was purple. You will hang for this, he sputtered. You will hang, and your soul will be damned. Sergeant, he bellowed. Get a rope, throw it over the main gate. We will hang her now. The crowd, broken from its shock, roared in approval. Hang her! As the soldiers ran to obey, a new sound was heard. A wagon, a single, heavy freight wagon, pulled by 4 mules, was rolling slowly into the fort's main gate. It was driven by an old Lakota man, his face wrinkled, his hair white. Beside him sat a younger man, his face painted, his hair braided. They were surrounded by bundles of furs. Traitors, the gate guard grumbled, waving them through. Hold up, we're busy. The wagon did not stop. It kept rolling, slow and steady, right into the middle of the parade ground, between Ellie and the colonel. The old man on the wagon seat was Eagle's Cry. The man beside him was Tashunka. He was not weak. He was not sick. His eyes, fixed on Ellie, were burning with a cold, clear fire. He had followed her. He and Kangi and 2 other warriors had been hidden in the hills, watching. They had seen her captured. Now, Tashunka said, his voice low. He threw back the canvas cover of the wagon. It was not filled with furs. It was filled with 10 Lakota warriors, Kangi among them, their faces painted for war, their rifles raised. They opened fire. The first volley was devastating, aimed at the soldiers around the colonel. The crowd screamed, a wave of panic breaking as people ran, scrambling for cover. Tashunka was not firing. He had a different target. He leaped from the wagon seat, his bow in his hand. His right arm, though stiff, was strong enough. He had 2 arrows. He saw the colonel, his face a mask of shock, pulling his revolver. Tashunka fired. The arrow took the colonel in the shoulder, spinning him around. It was not a killing shot. It was a message. Ellie, Tashunka yelled. She was already moving. The 2 soldiers holding her had been hit in the first volley. She grabbed a fallen soldier's pistol. Sniper on the roof, Kangi yelled, pointing to the mercantile. Ellie saw him, the gap-toothed trapper, the one who had recognized her. He had his rifle, and he was aiming it, not at the warriors, but at Tashunka. Ellie raised her pistol with both hands. Just as she had in the valley, she fired. The trapper stood, his rifle discharging into the sky, and pitched forward, crashing from the roof into the street below. Tashunka saw it. He looked at her, a look of pure, fierce pride. He ran to the colonel, who was on his knees, clutching his shoulder. Tashunka put his knife to the man's throat. The fighting stopped. The Lakota had formed a circle, their rifles covering the surviving soldiers, who had their hands raised. Colonel, Tashunka said, his voice calm. You wanted a trial. This is a trial. You savage! The colonel gasped. You will all be hunted down. You will hang for this. Maybe, Tashunka said, but not today. You will tell your men to put down their guns. I will not. Tashunka pressed the knife, a single drop of blood welling. Then you will die, and they will die. I do not care. My wife is safe. The word, my wife, hung in the air. Ellie's heart stopped. Do it, the colonel choked. Drop your weapons. Let them go. The soldiers, terrified, threw their rifles onto the muddy ground. Get on the wagon, Tashunka commanded Ellie. She climbed up, Kangi pulling her onto the seat. Tashunka held his knife to the colonel, backing away. He leaped onto the wagon himself, took the reins, and, with a war cry, he whipped the mules. The wagon burst forward, thundering toward the gate. The horses, Kangi yelled. The rest of the warriors were untying their horses, which had been tied behind the wagon. They mounted, a fast, fluid motion. The wagon hit the street, scattering chickens and screaming civilians. Soldiers were beginning to regroup, picking up their rifles. They're heading for the bridge, a soldier yelled. Cut them off! Go, go, Ellie yelled, as Tashunka whipped the mules into a frantic gallop. The heavy wagon careened down the street. The warriors rode beside them, a wild, whooping guard of honor. They reached the edge of town. Ahead was the bridge, a long, rickety wooden structure spanning the deep, fast-flowing Platte River. They will trap us, Kangi yelled, riding beside them. The bridge is old. It will hold, Tashunka roared. The mules, terrified, hit the bridge. The wooden planks clattered and groaned under the weight of the heavy wagon. They were halfway across. Behind them, the soldiers, led by the wounded colonel on horseback, were thundering down the street. They are coming, Ellie cried. A support beam on the bridge splintered. The wagon lurched, the back wheel breaking through the wood. We are stuck. No, Tashunka said. He drew his knife. Cut the mules, he yelled at Ellie. Cut them free. He leaped from the wagon, landing on the bridge. He ran to the side, his knife flashing as he cut the main support ropes, already weakened by rot. Tashunka! Ellie screamed, sawing at the leather harnesses. The bridge groaned, a long, tearing, shrieking sound. The far side began to sag. The horses, Kangi. Get the horses across, Tashunka yelled. Kangi and the warriors did not hesitate. They galloped their horses past the wagon, leaping the growing gap, landing safely on the far bank. Jump, Ellie, jump! Tashunka roared as the bridge began to fall. The mules were free. Ellie leaped from the wagon seat, not to the bridge, but onto the back of the nearest mule, her hands gripping its mane. She kicked it, and the animal, frantic, scrambled onto the collapsing bridge. Tashunka was running, the structure falling apart behind him. The colonel and his men were at the other end, firing, their bullets pinging off the wagon. Ellie's mule made it, scrambling up the far bank. Tashunka leaped, a desperate, flying leap, as the entire bridge, with the wagon and the colonel's hopes, tore free and crashed into the churning, muddy water below. He landed hard, rolling. Ellie was off the mule in a second, running to him. He was alive. He was laughing. He pulled her to her feet, his arms, both strong, wrapping around her. He held her, his face buried in her hair, breathing her in. On the far side of the river, the colonel and his soldiers stood, helpless, shaking their fists in the air. Tashunka held her, his warriors letting out a high, wild cry of victory. They had done it. They had walked into the heart of the enemy, taken what was theirs, and left them in ruins. They were free. They rode north for 10 days, a hard, desperate flight that left the Platte River and the smoking ruins of Fort Rawlins far behind. They were no longer just fugitives. They were legends, ghosts of the prairie. The story of the raid, of the white woman who had shot the trapper and the warrior who had held a knife to the colonel's throat, was told in hushed tones by soldiers and in triumphant cries by the scattered, hunted bands of Lakota. Tashunka had led them, not stopping, not resting, until they were deep in the broken, pine-shrouded borderlands of the Montana Territory. With them was Kangi and the 10 warriors who had made the raid. In the wagon, which they had pushed and pulled through creeks and over ridges, were the true spoils of their victory: sacks of flour, rifles, ammunition, and, most precious of all, the entire medical stock of the Fort Rawlins Mercantile. Kangi, in the chaos, had looted it all, acting on a desperate, intuitive hope. They found what was left of their people Eagle's Cry, Nita, her son, Little Owl, and the dozen or so women and old men who had escaped the burning valley. The reunion was not joyous. It was a weeping, stunned coming together of survivors. They had lost their homes, their sacred lands, their sons, and their husbands. But they were alive. They found a new home, a valley hidden so deep in the granite peaks, protected by such a labyrinth of false canyons, that no white patrol would ever find it by accident. Here, they made their stand. The months that followed were not heroic. They were hard and lean and bitter. Winter came down from the north like a wolf, burying them in snow. But they were together. Tashunka, his strength returning day by day, fueled by Ellie's medicines and Nita's care, became the leader his father had always known he could be. He and Kangi organized the hunts. They were a small band, but they were smart, and they were survivors. Ellie's role became clear. She was no longer a guest, no longer a captive, and no longer just a healer. She was the healer. The medicines Kangi had stolen were a miracle. She set up a field hospital in a large, dry lodge, the one that had belonged to the medicine man who had died in the fire. She treated the Lakota. She fought the lung fever that had returned with the cold. But this time she had quinine, and she lost no one. She stitched the wounds from the hunt. She delivered a new baby, Nita's sister's child, and held the new, crying life in her hands, a fragile symbol of their future. But her work did not stop with the Lakota. Word spread, carried by the wind, by moccasin telegraph. They said a white woman, a healer, lived with Hawk That Rides band. They said she would treat anyone, without question. And so they came. First, a trapper, half-starved, his hand mangled in a bear trap. He was a white man, terrified, expecting to be killed. Ellie had just looked at his hand, nodded, and said, "Sit." She had cleaned the wound, amputated 2 fingers with her husband's clean, sharp tools, and saved his life. He had left a week later, shaking his head, leaving behind 3 fine beaver pelts. Then came 2 others, deserters from the army, young men, barely 20, who had seen enough of killing and had run into the wilderness. They had scurvy, their gums bleeding, their bodies aching. Ellie had fed them broth and herbs, and had sent them on their way with a warning to avoid the patrols. She was a strange, neutral power in the wild. She was the white squaw healer, an outcast from her own people, who now healed all peoples. Tashunka watched her, his pride in her a fierce, quiet thing that he showed not in words, but in the way he stood guard outside her lodge, ensuring no one, Lakota or white, ever bothered her while she worked. But Ellie could not forget the world she had left. She was still Eleanor Whitlock. She still believed in words, in reason. One night, by the fire, she wrote a letter. She had no fine paper, just a piece of cured hide. She wrote, not with ink, but with a mixture of charcoal and water. She wrote to the Secretary of War in Washington. She did not ask for a pardon. She did not beg. She told the truth. She told them about her husband, Dr. Arthur Whitlock, and his letters about the pox blankets. She told them about Lieutenant Nathan Cole, about his obsessive hatred, his attack on a peaceful village. She told them why she had killed him. "I am not a savage," she wrote, "but I have been forced to live among those you call savage, and I have found more honor, more truth, and more God here than I ever found in your forts or your cities. I ask not for my own life, but for his. Leave Tashunka and his small band in peace. They have lost their lands. They have lost their homes. They want only to be left alone. Let the killing end. She gave the letter and the last of her money, a $10 gold piece, to the half-breed trapper, who had sworn he would see it delivered to a man at the railroad, a man who could send it east. She waited for an answer. She prayed for it. The answer came 3 months later. In the early spring, it did not come from Washington. It came from Kengi, who had been scouting near the Black Hills. He rode into camp, his face like a stone, and went straight to the council lodge, where Tashunka and Eagle's Cry were smoking. "It is gone," Kengi said, his voice flat, dead. "What is gone?" Tashunka asked. "The Pahasapa, the sacred land." Kengi's voice broke. It is as if the earth has been turned upside down. They have found it." "Found what?" "The yellow rock, the gold." He looked at his chief. "There are thousands of them, white men, pouring in like ants. They are building towns. They are cutting the trees. They are digging up the graves of our ancestors, looking for the gold, the army. They do not stop them. They help them. The treaty is gone. The land is lost." The silence in the lodge was absolute. Tashunka looked at his father. Eagle's Cry closed his eyes, his face a mask of grief. The fight of his entire life, the war that had taken his other sons, the war that had cost him his wife. It had been for nothing. The world had not stopped for their love, for their survival, for their fight. The world had just rolled on, hungry and greedy, and it had taken their heart. Tashunka stood. He said nothing. He walked out of the lodge, past Ellie, who had heard the news, her face pale. He did not look at her. He took his horse and he rode out, up to the high ridge above their valley. He did not come back that night, or the next. Ellie went mad with worry. She went to Eagle's Cry. "Where is he?" "He is speaking to the spirits," the old man said, his voice weary. "He is saying goodbye to his mother. He is saying goodbye to his oath. He is finding a new one." On the third morning, Tashunka returned. He was gaunt, his eyes burning with a new, cold fire. He was no longer just a warrior. He was a chief. He called the council. He called Ellie. "The Pahasapa is gone," he said, his voice flat. "The world of our fathers is gone. The buffalo are dying. The Wasiku have won. Their hunger is a fire that will eat the whole world." He looked at his father. "We cannot fight them. There are too few of us, but we can live." He looked at Kengi. "We will go north, far north, into the high cold lands of the snow-eaters, in the land of the queen. We will go where the grass is thin and the winters are long. We will go where the white man will not follow, because there is no gold there." He was giving up his homeland. He was choosing to lead his people, the last 23 of them, into exile. It was the only way to save them. The council was silent. They knew he was right. Eagle's Cry nodded, a single, slow, heartbreaking gesture. "It is your time, my son. Lead us. I will follow." Tashunka nodded. Then he looked at Ellie. His face, which had been hard, softened, just for a moment. He went to her, outside the lodge, away from the others. "Ellie," he said. He took her hands. They were rough now, chapped, a healer's working hands. "I am taking my people north. It will be a hard life. It will be forever. This is my path. It is not yours." She looked at him, her heart aching. "What are you saying?" "I am giving you a choice," he said, his voice rough. "The trappers, the white men you healed, they will take you south. You can go to a new city, San Francisco, Denver. You can change your name. You can be Mrs. Smith. You can be a healer. You can be safe. You can live." Ellie looked at him, at this man who was offering to break his own heart to save her. She thought of San Francisco, a city full of strangers, a city full of the same laws, the same churches, the same lies she had fled, a world where she would be a ghost, hiding from her past. Safe, she said, her voice quiet. She touched his face, the high cheekbone, the scar at his temple. I have not been safe since the day I met you. I do not think I even know what the word means. She smiled, a small, sad smile. My husband, Dr. Whitlock, he offered me safety, a safe life in Boston. It was a prison. You offer me a hard life, a cold life, and a life of running. And you offer it, with you. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. Tashunka, do you not know you are my home? These people, your father, Nita, Little Owl, they are my people now. Where you go, I go. There is no other path for me. He closed his eyes, his relief a physical, shuddering thing. He pulled her to him, his arms crushing her. Ellie, he breathed. My heart, my wife. Not yet, a voice said. Nita was standing there. Her face was not hard, not filled with jealousy. It was serene. Not yet, my brother. You have chosen her. Now, the people must choose her. She looked at Ellie. You have healed us, healer. You have fought for us. You have saved my son's life. You have saved his. But you are Wasiku. Your blood is not our blood. Nita, Tashunka began, his voice a warning. Hush, warrior, Nita said, her voice surprisingly gentle. She must be made Lakota. Her spirit is Lakota. Now, her blood must be. That night, the entire village gathered. Eagle's Cry stood before the central fire. We are a small people, he said. We are the last of the Buffalo Creek Band. Now, we leave the land of our fathers, to find a new home. We must be one. We cannot be two. He looked at Ellie. This woman, Eleanor, has a white spirit. Tashunka has a Lakota spirit. Tonight they will become one. The spirits will be joined. Nita came forward. She held a sharp, obsidian knife. She went to Ellie. Do not be afraid, she whispered. She took Ellie's hand and made a small, clean cut in her palm. She went to Tashunka. She took his hand and made the same cut. Now, Nita commanded, join! Tashunka and Ellie stood before the fire, before the entire tribe, and clasped their bleeding hands. Their blood, his and hers, mingled, becoming one. You are one blood, Nita said, her voice ringing. You came to us as a captive. You stayed as a healer. You now join us as a sister. Eleanor who heals. You are Lakota. The tribe let out a low, murmuring approval. Little Owl, no longer sick, ran forward and hugged Ellie's leg. It was done. She was one of them. And now, Eagle's Cry said, his voice rising, a note of joy in it for the first time in a year. We will have a marriage. He turned to the fire. He motioned for them to stand before him. A marriage is 2 breaths, he said, his voice dropping to a low, holy tone. But a Lakota marriage, a true marriage, is one. You will share one fire. You will share one life. You will share one breath. He bent to the fire. He took a small stick and lifted a single, glowing hot coal, a piece of wood that burned like a red star in the darkness. He held it to Tashunka. Take the fire of your people, my son, the fire of your ancestors. Let it burn away your past. Tashunka, his eyes on Ellie, opened his mouth. He took the hot, searing coal onto his tongue. He did not flinch. His eyes watered, but he held it. Eagle's Cry bent and retrieved another coal. He held it to Ellie. Take the fire of your new life, my daughter, the fire of this land. Let it burn away your fear. Ellie looked at the glowing coal. She was terrified, but she looked at Tashunka, who stood waiting for her, the fire in his own mouth. She took a deep breath, and she opened her mouth. The pain was a sharp, searing, white-hot agony. It was the pain of the blizzard, The pain of the bullet. The pain of killing Nathan Cole. It was the pain of her entire life, concentrated in one spark. She held it. "Now," Eagle's cry commanded, his voice a whisper. "Breathe as one." Tashunka and Ellie turned to each other. They stood so close, their foreheads touched, their eyes were locked. Together, they exhaled. Two plumes of white, acrid smoke and steam hissed from their lips. The plumes met in the cold night air, swirled, danced, and became one. A single twisting column of shared breath that rose, joining the smoke of the central fire, and ascended to the stars. "It is done," Eagle's cry said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are one." Tashunka pulled her to him. He kissed her. His lips were burned, as hers were. It was not a soft kiss. It was a kiss of ash, and pain, and fire, and a promise so deep it had no words. It was the taste of forever. They turned, their hands still clasped, to face their people. The tribe began to sing. A low, soft song of welcome, a song of new beginnings. Ellie looked up. The sky was clear, the stars sharp as diamonds, but in the west, the last light of the sun had stained the horizon a deep, impossible, burning red. It was the color of the blood they had shed. It was the color of the fire they had just shared. It was not the end of their war, she knew, but it was, for now, a fragile and a beautiful peace. The years fell away, one by one. Like leaves from a cottonwood in a high wind, the land they found, in the cold, northern sanctuary on the Montana border, was hard. The winters were a white, howling war against starvation. The summers were a short, desperate, green gasp, a frantic season of hunting and gathering. But they survived. The band of 23 souls became 30, then 40. They were a strange nation, a mix of Eagle's Cry's Lakota and the occasional lost white trapper, half-breed scout, or army deserter who had found their way to the hidden valley and, recognizing a place outside the world's harsh laws, had chosen to stay. They were the forgotten, the outcasts, the runaways. They were a people of two spirits, held together by one law: survive and be free. Ellie's clinic became the heart of the valley. It was a sturdy lodge built of pine, not hides, with a stone chimney that was always smoking, a beacon of warmth in the long, dark cold. She was Eleanor Who Heals, and her skill, augmented by Nita's deep knowledge of mountain herbs, became a legend in the high territories. She set the bones of hunters who fell on the ice. She delivered babies in the dead of winter. Her hands, once soft, now chapped and hard, the steadiest hands in the territory. She fought the lung fevers with the quinine she had once ridden to hell to retrieve, and she lost no one. Little Owl, Nita's son, grew tall and strong, his cough a distant, ghostly memory. Tashunka, hawk that rides, never saw the Paha Sapa again. The loss of his sacred land was a grief that he held in a quiet, closed part of his heart, but he built a new home. He was a chief, a husband, and a father. He and Ellie had 2 children, a son with his father's black, watchful eyes and his mother's stubborn, compassionate heart, and a daughter with her mother's pale hair and her father's quiet, unshakable soul. He taught them the old ways, the songs, the language, the way to read the snow like a book, the way to listen to the wind. She taught them to read the white man's books, to speak the language of the world that was, but that they were no longer a part of. They lived free. It was not an easy freedom. It was not a romantic freedom. It was a freedom earned every single day, in the hunt, in the harvest, in the long, dark, bitter cold. But it was theirs. Tashunka died in his sleep, his hair as white as the snow on the peaks, his hand held firmly in hers. He was an old man, and he died in his own bed, in his own home, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. It was a peaceful death, a death no one from his warrior generation could have ever dreamed of. Ellie lived on for many years. She was the grandmother of the valley, the old, wise woman, her face a beautiful map of her own long winters. She continued to heal. She continued to teach. She was the last one left who remembered the burning valley, the long ride, the taste of the sacred fire on her tongue. When she knew her own time was near, she took a piece of charcoal and a clean, dry piece of deer hide, and she wrote one last letter. She had taught her own granddaughter, a girl of 16 with pale hair and dark eyes, to read and write the English language. "When I am gone," Ellie whispered, her voice as frail as a dry leaf, "you will ride south for a week. You will find a town on the new railroad. You will find a man who can send this to the east, to my sister's child. My niece, her name is on the front. I want one person in that world to know. I want them to know I was not lost." Her granddaughter, weeping, promised she would. Ellie died a week later. They did not burn her, as Tashunka had asked for himself. He had been a man of the wind, his ashes scattered from the high ridge. She was a woman of the earth. They buried her on that same high ridge, beside the 2 tall pines where Tashunka's spirit watched, the place where he had sat, all those years ago, saying goodbye to his old life. Many years later, more than 50, the world had changed. The frontier was a memory. The territories were states, lines drawn on a map. The great wars were over, their bloody echoes reduced to names and dates in heavy books. In 1953, an archaeologist, a young, earnest man from a university in Boston, was surveying a remote, uncharted valley in the high borderlands of Montana. His team was looking for evidence of early fur trapper settlements. What they found was a ruin, the collapsed remains of a small, self-sufficient community, the rotted foundations of several lodges, a central fire pit, and, most curious, a small, sturdy cabin built of pine, with a fallen stone chimney. Inside this cabin, they found things that did not belong together. A rusted, but clearly expensive, set of 19th century surgical tools, of Boston manufacture, lay beside a stone mortar and pestle for grinding herbs. They found shards of dark glass from laudanum bottles and fragments of a porcelain teacup. And outside, on the high ridge overlooking the valley, they found the grave. It was marked, not by a wooden cross, but by 2 parallel, upright slabs of dark granite, clearly hand-carved. The wind and snows of half a century had almost erased the markings, but the archaeologist, a young man with a name he had always found peculiar, knelt and brushed away the lichen and the grit. He traced the faint, carefully carved letters. The first stone read, "He rode the wind." The second stone, beside it, read, "She healed the broken." The archaeologist, the young man from Boston, stood for a long, long time, the cold, high-altitude wind whipping his hair. His name was Arthur Cole Whitlock. He was the great-grandnephew of a woman who had vanished from the family history. A black sheep, a terrible rumor. A widow named Eleanor who, according to the whispers, had gone mad on the frontier and run off with the savages. He looked at the 2 stones, standing side by side, facing the endless, open, and free sky. He did not feel he had found a ruin. He felt, with a strange, aching certainty, that he had found a home. In the small, dusty towns that bordered the reservation, down in the flatlands, the story was still told. The old ones, the great-grandchildren of Nita and Little Owl, told it to their children when the sun went down and the sky turned a deep, burning red. "They say," the old women would whisper, their voices dry as the wind, as they sat by their own fires, that you can still see them when the wind blows hard from the north in the winter, or when the Chinook comes in the spring to melt the snow. They say 2 spirits ride the wind, 2 horses, one dark, one pale. They ride across the high ridges, faster than any living horse could run. And if you are lucky, if you are very quiet, you can see them. A tall warrior and a woman with pale hair, riding like a part of the wind itself. They are not running, they are not escaping. They are just riding, and they say, if you look closely, their hands are always joined. The letter, the one Ellie had written on the deer hide, had made it. It had been delivered, decades late, to a wealthy old woman in a Boston parlor. A grand dame who had read it, wept, and then hidden it in her desk. Ashamed and moved, it was found, after her own death, by her children. It read, "My dearest Anne, you will not remember me. I am your aunt, your mother's sister, the one she told you had died. In many ways, she was not wrong. I did die, the woman I was, Eleanor Whitlock of Boston. She died on a dusty plain in Wyoming. She died of a broken heart, and of a world she discovered was built on terrible lies. I write this not to shock you or to shame our family, but to tell you that I found a new life. It was not the life I was promised. It was a life that was hard and cold and often cruel, but it was a life that was, for the first time, true. Do not let them tell you what freedom is. Freedom is not a parlor. It is not a law. It is not a church. I learned that freedom is not running away from what you fear. I ran for so long. Freedom, my dear niece, is running toward what you love. I learned this in the wild. I learned it from a people you have been taught to hate. I learned it from a man you would have been taught to call a savage. He was the most civilized, the most honorable man I ever knew. He was my husband. He was my chief. He was my home. Do not be afraid of a life that is not safe. Do not be afraid of love that breaks their rules. The only sin, the only true, unforgivable sin, is to live a life that is not your own. Forgive the ghosts of our family. Forgive my first husband, the doctor, for the terrible sins he committed in the name of progress. And forgive me for the sins I committed in the name of love. Live truly, that is all. That is everything. Your loving aunt, Eleanor, who heals Lakota. The wind blows across the high prairie, a long, lonesome, and eternal sound. It whispers through the tall grass, the grass that has long since grown over the wagon ruts, over the old battlefields, over the unmarked graves of men like Nathan Cole. It is a land of ghosts, a land of memory. But in the high country, where the mountains touch the sky, the wind is not a lament. It is a song. It sings of the two who found their peace, not in the world they were given, not in the small, empty, well-lit rooms of their birth, but in the vast, wild, and unforgiving world they chose. They were born enemies, died lovers, and lived free in the breath of the plains. Thank you for listening to our story. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please comment below and let us know where you are listening from. Your interaction helps us all share this experience. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales, and give this video a like to support us even more. Press that hype button. It truly helps this story get heard by more people.